"Security! Get this trash out of the lobby immediately!" my son screamed, pointing at the frail old man standing next to me, his face twisted in disgust. He didn't realize that the trash he was trying to throw out was actually the man who owned the building, the firm, and his entire future. And by the time he realized his mistake, it was far too late. Before I continue this story of betrayal and justice, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by your own family. My name is Caleb Jefferson, and I am 68 years old. I sat near the back of the number 42 bus watching the gray city blocks roll by through a window smeared with grime. I could have been sitting in the back of a climate-controlled sedan with a private driver. I have $12 million in diversified assets, mostly in logistics, warehousing, and blue-chip stocks. But nobody knows that. Not my neighbors, and certainly not my son Terrence. To the world, I am just a retired shipping manager living on a fixed pension in a small house on the south side. To Terrence, I am an embarrassment, a remnant of a past he is trying desperately to scrub away. I adjusted the collar of my worn denim jacket. It was sturdy and clean, but it was old, just like me. Terrence had called me yesterday, his voice dripping with that fake sweetness he uses when he wants something. "Dad, you need to come by the office tomorrow," he had said. "We need to sign those transfer papers for the house. It is just a formality for your insurance. Just a formality." Those words rang in my ears like a warning bell. You do not survive 40 years in the cutthroat world of port logistics without developing a sixth sense for danger. My gut told me this was not about insurance. I reached down and patted my left ankle. Beneath the leg of my loose trousers, strapped securely against my sock, was my old snub-nose revolver. I had a permit for it, of course. I had carried it since the riots in the 90s. I did not plan to use it today. I was going to a law firm, not a war zone. But feeling the cold steel against my skin reminded me of who I was. I was not a senile old man to be pushed around. I was a man who had built an empire from nothing. I was walking into the lion's den, and I needed to be ready for whatever my son and his wife had planned for me. The bus screeched to a halt at the corner of 5th and Grand, and the hydraulic doors hissed open. A blast of cold air hit me. A white man stepped up from the curb. He looked to be about my age, maybe a little older, with wild white hair and a coat that had seen better decades. He moved with a slight limp, clutching a plastic bag as if it contained the crown jewels. He stopped at the fare box, his hands trembling as he dug through his pockets. He dropped a few coins in. Clink, clink. He paused, patting his chest and his pants pockets, his face turning red. "Move it along, Grandpa," the driver barked. He was a young man with a thick neck and zero patience. "I am sorry, I thought I had another quarter." The old man stammered, his voice thin and raspy. "Look, the fare is $2. You are 50 cents short. Either pay up or get off. I have a schedule to keep." The driver snapped. A group of teenagers in the back of the bus started snickering. One of them shouted, "Just walk, old man. It is good for your heart." The cruelty in the air was thick enough to taste. The old man looked down at his shoes, defeated. He started to turn around to step back off the bus. I felt a surge of heat in my chest. It was that old familiar anger, the kind that rises up when you see the strong preying on the weak. I stood up, my knees popping slightly, and walked to the front of the bus. My heavy work boots thudded against the floor. I stood next to the old man and looked the driver dead in the eye. I didn't say a word. I just stared at him with the look I used to give dock workers who tried to steal cargo. The driver swallowed hard and looked away. I reached into my pocket and dropped $1 into the box. "He rides with me," I said, my voice low and rough like gravel. The driver didn't argue. He just grunted and shut the doors. I gently touched the old man's elbow. "Come on, sit with me." The stranger didn't say thank you immediately. He just shuffled to the seat next to mine and collapsed into it, letting out a long breath that sounded like a tire losing air. He smelled of old paper and rain, but he didn't smell dirty. Up close, I noticed his fingernails were clean and his eyes were sharp. He wasn't a vagrant. He was something else. We rode in silence for a few blocks, the bus lurching through traffic. I went back to staring out the window, thinking about Terrence, my son, the big-shot lawyer. He had graduated top of his class thanks to the tuition I paid by working double shifts. Now he was a partner at Henderson and Wright, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. He had married Victoria, a woman who looked at me like I was something she had stepped in on the sidewalk. They were drowning in debt, trying to keep up appearances, and now they wanted my house. "Nice watch," the old man whispered. I froze. I hadn't realized my sleeve had ridden up when I reached for the stop cord earlier. I looked down. The gold rim of my 1950 Patek Philippe was barely visible. It was my one indulgence, a secret trophy I bought for myself 30 years ago when I closed my first seven-figure deal. It was worth more than this bus and everything in it. "Why is a man wearing a vintage Patek riding a city bus?" the old man asked. His voice wasn't shaky anymore. It was steady and commanding. I pulled my sleeve down quickly, covering the gold. "You have a sharp eye for a man who cannot find 50 cents, I replied, keeping my face neutral. The old man chuckled. It was a dry sound. "We are both pretending to be something we are not, aren't we, friend?" I turned to look at him fully. Beneath the disheveled hair and the old coat, there was a hardness in his face, a power. I knew that look. It was the look of a man who was used to giving orders, not taking them. "I am going to the Henderson and Wright building," I said, testing him. His eyes lit up with a strange gleam. "Henderson and Wright. That is a nest of vipers. What business does a man like you have there? My son works there. He is a lawyer. I am going to see him." The old man nodded slowly, rubbing his chin. "Is he a good lawyer or a good man?" I hesitated. That was the question that kept me up at night. "He is a good lawyer," I said finally. The silence that followed spoke volumes. "I am going there too," the old man said. "I have some unfinished business with the rats in that building. Take me with you." I don't know why I agreed. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was because I sensed a kindred spirit. Or maybe I just wanted to see Terrence's face when I walked in with a guest who didn't fit his high-class aesthetic. "Come on then," I said as the bus pulled up to the curb. "But stay close. They don't take kindly to visitors without appointments." We stepped off the bus and stood in front of the gleaming glass tower. It soared into the sky, a monument to corporate greed. I straightened my jacket and walked toward the revolving doors. The old man limped beside me, his head held high despite his rags. We walked into the lobby. It was a cavern of marble and steel, smelling of expensive cologne and ambition. Security guards in tight uniforms stood by the elevators, watching everyone with suspicion. I scanned the room looking for my son. Then I saw him. Terrence was standing near the reception desk talking to a client. He was wearing a navy blue custom-tailored suit that probably cost $3,000. His shoes shone under the lobby lights. He looked successful. He looked powerful. He looked nothing like the boy I had raised. He turned and saw me. For a second, I hoped to see a smile. I hoped to see some recognition of the father who had sacrificed everything for him, but his face didn't light up. It fell. His eyes narrowed and his lip curled in a sneer. He said something to the client, forcing a laugh, and then marched toward me. He didn't hug me. He didn't shake my hand. He stopped 3 feet away, his eyes darting around the lobby to see if anyone important was watching. "Dad, what the hell are you doing?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "I told you to come to the service entrance, not parade through the main lobby." I stood my ground. "I am not a servant, Terrence. I come through the front door." Then Terrence looked at the man standing next to me. His expression shifted from annoyance to pure horror. He took a step back, covering his nose as if he smelled something rotting. "And who is this?" he demanded, pointing a manicured finger at my companion. "Why did you bring a homeless person here?" "He is a friend," I said calmly. "He rode the bus with me." Terrence's face turned red. "This is a law firm, Dad, not a soup kitchen. You are embarrassing me." He turned and waved frantically at the security desk. "Security, get over here. Get this trash out of my lobby right now before he infects the clients." The old man stood perfectly still. He didn't flinch. He didn't look down. He just looked at Terrence with a gaze so cold it could have frozen water. I stepped between them. "He stays with me, Terrence." "You don't make the rules here, old man," Terrence spat. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep, trying to pull me toward the exit. "Get out. Both of you. Wait outside until I call you." At that moment, the heavy glass doors opened again and a woman walked in. It was Victoria, my daughter-in-law. She was wearing a white designer dress and carrying a handbag that cost more than my car. She saw the commotion and hurried over her heels, clicking on the marble. "Oh my God, Terrence, what is that smell?" she shrieked, wrinkling her nose. "Why is your father here with a beggar? Call the police. Tell them we are being harassed." 2 security guards were running toward us now, hands on their belts. People in the lobby stopped to watch. I felt the weight of the gun on my ankle, but I kept my hands open and visible. I wasn't going to give them an excuse. Terrence looked at me with eyes full of hate. "You just had to ruin everything, didn't you? You are useless. Just sign the papers and disappear, Dad. That is all you are good for." The security guard reached for the old man's shoulder. "Sir, you need to leave the premises immediately." The old man didn't move. He lifted his chin and spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise of the lobby like a knife. He looked directly at Terrence and said, "You still cite the Evans precedent incorrectly in your briefs, you sloppy junior associate." Terrence froze. His hand dropped from my arm. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost. He knew that voice. He knew that specific criticism. He had heard it on the internal training tapes. He had heard the legends. The security guard hesitated, looking from the ragged old man to the terrified lawyer. "Walter," the old man said, turning to me with a small smile. "My name is Walter P. Henderson, and I think it is time we went upstairs to my office, Caleb. I want to see exactly what this boy is trying to make you sign." Terrence dragged me behind a massive marble pillar, his fingers digging into my arm with a strength I did not know he possessed. He looked around frantically, ensuring that none of the partners or high-profile clients had seen us. His face was a mask of pure panic and embarrassment. "Dad, you are ruining everything," he hissed, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I told you to be discreet. I told you to wear the suit I bought you. Instead, you show up here looking like a dock worker dragging a homeless man into the most prestigious firm in the city. Do you have any idea how hard I have worked to build my reputation here? Do you have any idea what people will think if they see me with you two?" I pulled my arm free from his grip. I stood tall, smoothing out my jacket. "I am your father, Terrence," I said, my voice low and steady. "I paid for your degree. I paid for your suits. I paid for the very shoes you are standing in. Do not ever handle me like that again." Terrence laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You paid. You think your little contributions matter now? This is a different world, Dad, a world you do not belong in, and neither does he." He gestured violently at Walter, who was standing calmly a few feet away, watching us with those sharp blue eyes. At that moment, the elevator doors dinged open and Victoria stepped out. My daughter-in-law looked like she had just stepped off a runway. She was wearing a white dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, and her expression was one of absolute disgust. She took one look at me and then at Walter, and she actually recoiled. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small crystal bottle of perfume. With a theatrical sigh, she began spraying the air between us, creating a mist of expensive floral scent as if she were trying to fumigate a pest infestation. "Oh my God, Terrence, the smell is unbearable," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "It smells like wet dog and poverty in here. Why are they still here? I told you to get rid of them." "Victoria, please keep your voice down," Terrence begged, looking terrified. "No, I will not keep my voice down," she snapped. "This is harassment. They are trespassing. I am calling 911 right now. I feel threatened." She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. I watched her, feeling a cold knot of anger tighten in my stomach. This was the woman my son had chosen. This was the woman he was destroying his life for. She looked at me not as a person, but as a stain on her perfect white existence. "I feel unsafe, Terrence," she said loudly, performing for the people in the lobby. "That man looks dangerous. He looks like he could have a disease." She pointed a manicured finger at Walter. The old man didn't flinch. He just stood there, leaning slightly on his left leg, watching her with a look of clinical curiosity, as if she were a strange insect he had found under a rock. Suddenly, the sound of heavy boots on marble cut through the tension. 2 security guards were sprinting toward us, their hands resting on the batons at their belts. They were big men with thick necks and angry faces. They saw a well-dressed lawyer and a crying woman, and they saw 2 old men in ragged clothes. They didn't need to ask questions. They knew who the bad guys were supposed to be. "Sir, step away from Mr. Jefferson," one of the guards barked, reaching for my shoulder. My old instincts kicked in. 40 years in the shipping yards had taught me that when a man comes at you with a weapon, you do not wait to see what he does with it. I felt the cold steel of the revolver against my ankle. My hand twitched, moving toward my leg. It was muscle memory. It was the reflex of a man who had survived riots and robberies. I shifted my weight, ready to drop to a knee and draw, but before I could move, a hand clamped down on my forearm. It wasn't Terrence, it was Walter. His grip was surprisingly strong, iron hard. He didn't look at me. He was looking at the guards. "No, Caleb," Walter said softly. "Not today. Do not give them the satisfaction." I looked at him and I saw a transformation that made my breath catch in my throat. The Walter who had shuffled onto the bus, the Walter who had trembled while counting coins, was gone. In his place stood a man of immense power. He straightened his spine. The slight stoop in his shoulders vanished. He seemed to grow 3 inches taller. His chin lifted and his eyes turned into cold, hard flint. He released my arm and stepped forward, placing himself between me and the guards. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't back down. He simply stood there, radiating an authority that felt heavy in the air. The lead guard hesitated. He was 2 feet away from Walter, his baton half drawn, but he stopped. There was something in Walter's posture, something in the way he held his head that made the guard pause. It was the unconscious recognition of a superior. "Remove your hand from your weapon, son," Walter said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that froze everyone in that corner of the lobby. The guard blinked, confused. "Sir, you need to leave or we will remove you by force." Walter ignored him. He turned his head slowly, locking eyes with Terrence. My son was standing there sweating, shaking slightly, trying to signal the guards to attack. "Terrence Jefferson," Walter said. Terrence flinched as if he had been slapped. He looked at the ragged old man, confusion warring with fear in his eyes. "You filed the brief for the Evans merger yesterday morning, didn't you?" Walter asked. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Terrence's mouth opened and closed. "How? How do you know about the Evans merger?" "That is confidential. That is internal." Walter took a step closer to my son. The smell of old paper and rain seemed to vanish, replaced by the invisible aura of a courtroom predator. "In paragraph 4, section C, you cited the 1998 ruling." Walter continued, his voice crisp and precise. "You used the dissenting opinion as the basis for your argument. You still cite the Evans precedent incorrectly, you sloppy junior associate." The silence that followed was absolute. The noise of the lobby seemed to fade away. The only thing I could hear was the terrified wheeze of my son's breathing. Terrence went pale. All the blood drained from his face, leaving him the color of old ash. His eyes went wide, pupils dilating in sheer terror. He knew that voice. He had heard it on the orientation tapes on his first day. He had heard it in the legendary recordings the partners played during strategy meetings. He had heard that specific criticism before in the nightmares of every lawyer who worked at this firm. He looked at the old coat. He looked at the wild white hair. And then he looked at the eyes of the man whose name was on the building. "Mr. Henderson," Terrence whispered. It was barely a sound. It was a prayer of the damned. Walter smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that has just smelled blood in the water. "Hello, Terrence," Walter said. "I see you have met my friend Caleb." Victoria, who had been busy typing on her phone, looked up, annoyed. "Terrence, why are you talking to him? Tell the guards to throw them out. I am calling the police right now." "This is ridiculous!" "Shut up, Victoria!" Terrence screamed. His voice cracked. He spun around, waving his hands frantically at her. "Put the phone away. Shut up right now." Victoria froze her phone halfway to her ear, shocked by her husband's tone. He had never raised his voice at her. Not once. Terrence turned back to Walter, his hands trembling uncontrollably. He looked like he was about to vomit. He signaled the guards, his movements jerky and desperate. "Back off," he croaked at the security team. "Stand down. Get away from him." The guards looked at each other confused, but they stepped back, lowering their batons. Mr. Henderson Terrence stammered, sweat pouring down his forehead. "Sir, I had no idea. I didn't know it was you. You like trash," Walter finished for him. "Like something you should scrape off your shoe." "Is that it, Terrence?" "No, sir. No. I was just trying to protect the firm's image." Terrence was shaking so hard his knees were knocking together. "Protect the image." Walter laughed dryly. "By assaulting a guest, by disrespecting your own father, by being a coward." Victoria walked over her heels, clicking sharply. She looked from Terrence to Walter, her face twisted in confusion and anger. "Terrence, what is going on? Who is this old bum? Why are you bowing to him?" "Victoria, stop," Terrence hissed, grabbing her arm. "This is Mr. Henderson. Walter Henderson." Victoria laughed. A high, shrill sound. "Don't be stupid, Terrence. Walter Henderson is a billionaire. Walter Henderson is a legend. This guy is a homeless person who rode the bus with your father. Look at his shoes, Terrence. Look at his coat." I looked at Walter. He was enjoying this. He was letting them dig their own graves. "Walter P. Henderson hasn't been seen in public for 5 years," Victoria continued. Everyone knows he is a recluse. This is just some crazy old man. Walter turned his gaze to Victoria. He looked her up and down, examining her designer dress, her expensive bag, her jewelry. He looked at her with the same disdain she had shown him. "And you must be the wife Walter said, the one who needs a new house, the one who needs Caleb's money to pay off her credit cards." Victoria's mouth dropped open. "How dare you? You don't know anything about us." "I know everything," Walter said softly. "I know about the debt. I know about the loans. I know about the lifestyle you cannot afford. And I know you are the reason this boy is trying to steal his father's home." Victoria took a step back, fear finally starting to seep through her arrogance. Terrence looked like he was going to faint. "Sir, please, let me explain. We can go to my office. I can get you some coffee. We can talk about this." Walter ignored him. He turned to me. His face softened just a fraction. "Caleb, my friend," Walter said, "I think it is time we went upstairs. Not to this boy's cubicle. To the top floor. To the boardroom." He looked back at Terrence, his eyes hardening again. "Bring the papers, Terrence. Bring the transfer documents you wanted your father to sign. I want to read every single word." But Sir Terrence squeaked. Now Walter barked. The command cracked like a whip. Terrence jumped. "Yes, sir." "Right away, sir." Walter gestured toward the private executive elevator, the one that required a special key card, the one that only the founding partners used. "Come with me," Caleb, Walter said. "Let's see what kind of son you raised." I looked at Terrence. He was wiping sweat from his face with a silk handkerchief, his eyes filled with a terror so deep it looked like madness. I looked at Victoria, who was standing there pale and silent, her phone clutching in her hand like a lifeline that had been cut. I adjusted my jacket. I felt the weight of the gun on my ankle and the weight of the truth in my heart. "Lead the way, Walter," I said. As we walked toward the elevator, the guards parted like the Red Sea. They didn't know exactly what was happening, but they knew power when they saw it. And the man in the ragged coat, walking with a limp, was the most powerful thing in the building. The elevator ride up to the 45th floor was silent, but the air was thick enough to choke on. When the doors slid open, we stepped into a different world. This was not the sterile lobby below. This was old money. Dark mahogany walls, plush carpet that swallowed the sound of our footsteps, and a view of the city skyline that cost millions. Walter did not ask for directions. He walked straight to the massive double doors at the end of the hall and pushed them open. It was the main boardroom. A table long enough to seat 20 people dominated the room. Without a word, Walter limped to the head of the table, the chair with the highest back and the best view. He sat down and spun it around, facing us, his ragged coat looking like a battle flag against the expensive leather. He gestured for us to sit. I took the chair to his right. Terrence and Victoria sat opposite us like children called to the principal's office. Terrence tried to pour himself a glass of water from the crystal pitcher in the center of the table. His hand shook so violently that water splashed onto the polished wood. He stared at the puddle, terrified, as if he had just spilled blood. Victoria, however, did not seem to notice the gravity of the situation. She crossed her legs and looked at me with that same sneer she had worn in the lobby. She opened her mouth to speak, probably to insult my clothes again, but Walter held up a hand. One finger raised was all it took to silence her. The room was cold, artificially cooled to preserve the expensive art on the walls, but Terrence was sweating. Terrence fumbled with his leather briefcase, his fingers slipping on the brass latches. Finally, he pulled out a thick document stapled in the corner. He slid it across the mahogany table toward me, avoiding my eyes. "Just sign here, Dad," he said, his voice thin and reedy. "It is just standard procedure like I told you on the phone. It is for your health insurance. The company needs to update their files for retirees. Just a formality so you are covered if you get sick." He pointed to a line at the bottom marked with a yellow sticky note. Victoria tapped her manicured nails on the table impatiently. "Hurry up, Caleb, we have a lunch reservation," she snapped. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my reading glasses. They were cheap drugstore frames, but the lenses were sharp. I did not look at the signature line. I turned to the first page. Terrence twitched. "You do not need to read all that, Dad. It is just legal jargon. It is boring. Just sign it so we can leave." I ignored him. I adjusted my glasses and began to read. The words jumped out at me like strikes from a snake. Durable power of attorney, irrevocable, transfer of assets, full guardianship. This was not insurance. This was a death warrant for my freedom. It authorized Terrence to sell my house, access my bank accounts, and make medical decisions on my behalf, including end-of-life care. It stated that I, Caleb Jefferson, was of diminished mental capacity and unable to manage my own affairs. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest, replacing the heat of the anger. He was not just trying to take my house, he was trying to erase me. He was trying to declare me incompetent so he could strip the meat from my bones while I was still breathing. I looked up from the paper. Terrence was watching me, sweat dripping down his temple, waiting for the stroke of the pen that would end my life as a free man. I did not sign. Instead, I crumpled the document into a tight ball and threw it hard. It bounced off Terrence's forehead. "Do you think I am blind?" I asked, my voice steady and dangerous. "Do you think because I take the bus and live simply that I am stupid? This is not insurance. This is a power of attorney. You are trying to steal my life, Terrence. You are trying to declare me incompetent." Terrence flinched, rubbing his forehead. "Dad, please, you do not understand." Victoria slammed her hand on the table, making the crystal water glasses jump. "Stop it!" she screamed. Her face was twisted into a mask of ugly desperation, all her poise gone. "Just sign the damn paper, old man. We do not have time for your pride. We need that house. We need to leverage it against the loan today, right now. The lenders are waiting downstairs in the parking garage, and they said if we do not have the deed by noon, they are going to hurt us." She stopped, realizing what she had said. Her hand flew to her mouth, covering the confession that had just vomited out. Terrence closed his eyes as if he were waiting for a bullet. So that was it. It was not just greed, it was fear. They had borrowed money from people you do not borrow money from, and now they were trying to feed me to the wolves to save themselves. I looked at my son with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Who is downstairs, Terrence?" I asked. "Who did you borrow money from?" Before he could answer, a dry laugh cut through the tension. It came from the head of the table. Walter was leaning back in the leather chair, his fingers steeped together. "It is not just the loan sharks," Caleb Walter said, his voice sounding like grinding stones. "If it were just gambling debts or lifestyle loans, he might have survived this. He might have just lost his job. But your son has done something far worse." Terrence looked at Walter and started to sob. "Please, Mr. Henderson, do not." Walter ignored him. He looked at me, his blue eyes burning with intensity. "He did not just borrow money, Caleb. He stole it. He embezzled $2 million from the firm's charitable trust fund. That money was meant for the victims of the lead poisoning case in the housing projects. It was meant for sick children, and he took it to pay off his wife's gambling debts and buy that ridiculous sports car downstairs. He is not just a bad son, Caleb. He is a criminal. And I have the FBI on speed dial." Terrence dropped to his knees right there on the plush carpet of the executive boardroom, his $3,000 suit bunching up around his legs. "Please, Dad, do not let Mr. Henderson call the authorities. I can fix this. I swear I can fix it." His face was slick with sweat, and his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. He looked pathetic. A grown man begging his father to save him from his own greed. Walter sat at the head of the table, watching the spectacle with a look of pure boredom. He waved a hand, dismissing us. "Get him out of here, Caleb. You have 24 hours to decide his fate before I file charges." I grabbed Terrence by the collar and hauled him up. "We are leaving," I said, my voice flat. "But we are not going home. You said you wanted to talk. You said you wanted to negotiate. Fine. Take me to dinner. Take me to meet these in-laws of yours. The ones who think I am trash." Terrence nodded frantically, wiping his nose with his sleeve. Yes, okay. The Sullivans are in town. We are meeting them at Le Bernardin at 7. They can help. They have connections. They will know what to do." I looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. He still didn't get it. He still thought his rich white in-laws could save him from the consequences of his actions. I patted the pocket of my denim jacket, making sure the small digital voice recorder was still there. I had bought it years ago to record shipping manifests, but tonight it would record the end of my son's marriage. "Let's go," I said, pushing him toward the door. "Do not keep your masters waiting." The restaurant was the kind of place where they charge you for the air you breathe. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, and the waiters moved with the silence of assassins. I walked in wearing my work boots and denim jacket, ignoring the horrified stares of the hostesses. Terrence walked beside me, head down, looking like a man marching to the gallows. We were led to a private table in the back near the kitchen. Sitting there were two people who looked like they had been carved out of ice and money, Richard and Catherine Sullivan, Victoria's parents. Richard didn't stand up when we arrived. He just looked over the rim of his wine glass, his eyes scanning me from head to toe with a look of mild amusement. So this is the father, he drawled, his voice dripping with old money arrogance. Terrence, I thought you said he was retired, not destitute. Catherine laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. Oh, Richard, be nice. I am sure he dressed up as best he could. She turned to me, offering a hand that felt like a dead fish. Hello, Caleb. We have heard so much about you, mostly that you are a bit of a burden on our poor children. I sat down without shaking her hand. The chair was velvet soft enough to sleep in. I kept my hands on the table, my face a mask of confusion. I am sorry, ma'am, I said, pitching my voice to sound shaky and weak. My hearing is not what it used to be. Did you say something about burden? Catherine exchanged a look with her husband. A look that said he is senile too. Perfect. She raised her voice, speaking slowly and loudly as if I were a child. We said it is nice to meet you, Caleb. We are so glad you could join us before you go to your new home. My new home. They were not wasting any time. I nodded, smiling vacantly. Oh yes, my new home. Terrence says it is very nice. Lots of trees. Richard snorted. He cut into his steak, the knife screeching against the china. You know, Terrence, you really are a credit to your people. Most men from your background would have left the old man to rot in the street by now. But you are taking responsibility. You are cleaning up the mess. It is very noble. I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. A credit to your people. The insult was so casual, so practiced. It was the kind of racism that hides behind a compliment, the kind that smiles while it stabs you. Terrence didn't flinch. He didn't defend me. He just nodded, taking a large gulp of wine. Thank you, Richard. I try to do what is right. It is hard, you know. He has been slipping lately. Forgetting things. Getting aggressive. Aggressive, I thought. I will show you aggressive. But I kept my face blank, my eyes wide and watery. I reached for my water glass, letting my hand tremble violently, splashing a little on the tablecloth. Oh dear, I muttered. I am so clumsy these days. Catherine recoiled, pulling her silk dress away from the table. Watch it, old man. That is Armani. She leaned in toward Victoria, whispering loudly enough for the next table to hear, but assuming I was too deaf to catch it. God, he is disgusting. How much longer do we have to deal with this? Victoria sighed, sipping her martini. Not long, Mom. Terrence has the papers. Once we get the signature, we can drop him off at the state facility in the morning. Dr. Roberts has a bed waiting in the dementia ward, the state facility. Not a private nursing home, not a care center, the state asylum, the place where they send the indigent and the insane to die in hallways that smell of urine and bleach. They were going to throw me into a pit and forget I existed. And the house, Catherine whispered, her eyes gleaming with greed. We sell it immediately, Victoria replied, her voice low and eager. I already have a developer interested. They want to bulldoze it and put up luxury condos. The land in that neighborhood is gentrifying fast. We can get $400,000 for the lot alone. That covers the gambling debts and leaves enough for a down payment on the villa in Tuscany. $400,000. They were underselling it by half, but that wasn't the point. They were selling my life, my memories, the home where I raised that ungrateful boy, just to cover their mistakes and buy a vacation house. Richard laughed, wiping grease from his chin. Excellent. You two are smart. Ruthless. I like that. You remind me of myself when I was starting out. You do what you have to do to survive, even if it means trimming the dead weight. He looked right at me as he said it, raising his glass in a mock toast. To family, he said, smirking. I felt a fire in my belly that was hotter than any furnace I had ever stoked. Dead weight. I would show them dead weight. I looked at the table. Terrence had placed his phone next to his plate, face down. It was the latest model, sleek and black. My phone was in my pocket, an older model, but similar in size and shape. I needed that phone. I needed to see the messages I knew he was hiding. The messages from the loan sharks. The messages from the crooked doctor. The waiter arrived carrying a large silver tureen of lobster bisque. It was steaming hot, smelling of cream and sherry. He began to ladle the soup into our bowls. I saw my opening. I waited until the waiter moved to serve Richard. As the ladle tipped, pouring the scalding orange liquid, I let out a loud groan and jerked my entire body as if I were having a spasm. My arm flew out, flailing wildly. Whoops! I shouted, my voice cracking. My hand connected with the waiter's elbow. The ladle flew. The tureen tipped. A wave of hot lobster bisque launched across the table, landing squarely in Richard Sullivan's lap. Richard screamed. It was a high-pitched sound like a pig being stuck. He jumped up, knocking his chair over, clawing at his burning trousers. "Hot, hot! Get it off me!" Chaos erupted. Catherine shrieked, grabbing napkins and swatting at her husband's crotch. Victoria jumped back, overturning her martini. The waiter was apologizing, frantically trying to help. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," I wailed, standing up and knocking into the table, adding to the confusion. My arm, it just jerked. I do not know what happened. I am so old, so useless. Terence was on his feet, rushing to his father-in-law's side. "Richard, are you okay? Get some ice. Someone get ice." Everyone was looking at Richard. Everyone was distracted by the screaming millionaire covered in soup. I reached out with my left hand, quick as a striking cobra. I grabbed Terence's phone from the table and in the same motion slid my own phone out of my pocket and placed it where his had been. It took less than a second. 40 years of handling cargo manifests and slipping bribes to customs officials had left me with fast hands. I slipped Terence's phone into my jacket pocket. It felt heavy, warm, like a live grenade. "You stupid old fool," Richard roared, his face purple with rage and pain. "Look what you did. This is a $5,000 suit." I shrank back, playing the part perfectly. I am sorry. I should go. I should not be here." "Yes, you should go!" Catherine hissed, glaring at me with pure hatred. Get out before I have you arrested for assault." Terence turned to me, his face a mask of stress. "Dad, just go wait in the car. Give me the keys." "No, wait, you took the bus. Just go outside. I will deal with you later." I nodded, shuffling away from the table, head bowed. "I am sorry, son. I will wait outside." I walked toward the exit, my steps slow and uneven until I turned the corner out of their sight. Then I straightened my back. I walked past the hostess stand and into the corridor that led to the restrooms. I didn't go outside. I went straight into the men's room and locked the door behind me. I pulled Terence's phone out of my pocket. My hands weren't shaking now. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up asking for a passcode. I didn't hesitate. I typed in 0812, August 12th, his mother's birthday. The one piece of his past he hadn't erased. The phone unlocked. I scrolled to his messages. And there it was. Everything Walter had said and more. A text thread from a contact named Vinny the Shark. "Pay up by Friday, Terence, or we start taking fingers. Your wife is pretty. It would be a shame if she couldn't wear rings anymore." I scrolled down. An email chain with Dr. Roberts. Subject: medical certification. Attached is the diagnosis for Alzheimer's stage 4. As discussed, I need the $50,000 in cash before the hearing tomorrow. Once I sign this, he is legally a vegetable. You can do whatever you want with the assets. I felt sick. Physically sick. My son had sold me out to save his own skin and to line his pockets. He was going to let them lock me away until I died alone and confused, just so he could keep playing big shot. Suddenly the restroom door rattled. Someone was trying to get in. "Dad, I know you are in there. Open the door." It was Terence. He must have realized he had the wrong phone. He sounded breathless, panicked. I tapped the forward button on the email, sending it to my own secure cloud account. Then I started screenshots of the texts. "Dad, open this door right now," Terence screamed. He threw his weight against the wood. The lock groaned. I kept working. One more evidence. One more text. The door splintered. Terence burst in, his eyes wild, his face sweaty. He saw the phone in my hand. "Give me that," he roared, lunging at me. He didn't look like my son anymore. He looked like a stranger. He grabbed my wrist, twisting it hard. I didn't let go. I looked him in the eye. "I saw it, Terence," I said, my voice calm and cold. "I saw everything. The shark, the doctor, the house." His face contorted into a snarl. "You saw nothing, old man. You are confused. You are senile." He shoved me. Hard. I stumbled back, my boots slipping on the tiled floor. My head cracked against the porcelain sink. A sharp bolt of pain shot through my skull and the world went white for a second. I slid down to the floor, warm blood trickling down my neck. Terence stood over me, chest heaving. He snatched the phone from my hand. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't try to help me up. He just frantically tapped the screen, deleting the messages, deleting the emails. "You made me do this," he panted. "Why couldn't you just sign the papers? Why do you have to be so difficult? You are ruining my life." I touched the back of my head. My hand came away red. I looked at the blood, then up at him. "I am not ruining your life, son," I whispered. "You already did that yourself." He pocketed the phone and looked down at me, his eyes dead. Stay here. Do not move. If you tell anyone about this, I will tell the police you attacked Richard. I will tell them you are dangerous. They will lock you up tonight." He turned and walked out, leaving his father bleeding on the bathroom floor. I waited until the door swung shut. Then I reached into my other pocket and pulled out my smartwatch. It was recording. It had been recording since I entered the restaurant. I slowly pulled myself up, using the sink for support. I looked in the mirror. My eyes were clear. My resolve was steel. "You just declared war on the wrong man's son," I said to my reflection. I washed the blood off my neck, adjusted my denim jacket, and walked out the door. I wasn't going back to the table. I wasn't going back to my house. I was going to see Walter, and we were going to burn their world to the ground. I locked the heavy oak door of the restroom behind me and slid the brass bolt home with a satisfying click. The sounds of the restaurant, the clinking silverware, the murmurs of the wealthy, and the screams of Richard Sullivan were muffled now, replaced by the hum of the ventilation fan. I was alone in a sanctuary of marble and gold leaf, but my hands were not shaking. I leaned against the cold door for a second, taking a deep breath to steady my heart rate. I could feel the weight of the smartphone in my pocket burning against my leg like a branding iron. This was it. This was the moment I would look into the abyss of my son's soul. I pulled the phone out. It was sleek black and slippery in my calloused hands. The screen lit up with a tap showing a picture of a golden retriever I had never seen before. A generic lock screen for a man living a generic lie. It asked for a 6-digit passcode. I stared at the keypad. Terrence thought he was smarter than everyone else. He thought he was complex. But I knew him. I knew the boy who used to cry when it rained because he thought the sky was hurting. I knew the young man who stood by his mother's grave and promised to make her proud. He wouldn't use his own birthday. That was too obvious. He wouldn't use Victoria's birthday because deep down he probably resented her as much as he feared her. He would use the one thing that still felt pure to him, the one memory he thought was safe from his corruption. My fingers hovered over the numbers. August 12th, 1994. The day my wife, his mother, died. It was the day our world shattered and the day we had to start rebuilding, just the two of us. If he used that date, it meant there was still a piece of him that remembered who we were. It meant he was using her memory to lock away his sins. I typed in 081294. The phone vibrated once and unlocked. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I almost dropped the device. He had used her death date to protect his secrets. He had turned the most painful day of my life into a security measure for his greed. I felt a tear, hot and angry, slide down my cheek, but I brushed it away. I didn't have time for grief. I tapped the green icon for messages and the digital curtain was pulled back. The first thread was pinned to the top. The contact name was simply Vinny. No last name, just Vinny. But the content of the messages told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a friend. This wasn't a colleague. This was a shark. I scrolled up, reading the history of a man drowning in his own bad decisions. The messages started 3 months ago. Friendly at first, offering lines of credit for gambling. Then they turned cold. Then they turned violent. The most recent text had come in 20 minutes ago while we were sitting at the table eating lobster bisque. It read, "Listen to me, you little lawyer maggot. You have 48 hours. If I do not see 200 grand in the account by Friday noon, I am not coming for you. I am coming for the wife. She has pretty hands. It would be a shame if she couldn't wear those diamond rings anymore because she didn't have fingers to put them on. Tick-tock, Terrence." I felt the blood drain from my face. My son was not just in debt, he was in mortal danger. He had borrowed money from people who dealt in pain, and he had used my assets as collateral without my consent. That explained the desperation. That explained the sweat on his brow and the terror in his eyes when Walter Henderson spoke to him. He was a cornered rat, willing to bite anything to survive, even his own father. I closed the messages and opened his email app. I searched for the name Walter had mentioned. Roberts. Dr. Roberts. The search results pulled up a thread with a subject line that made my stomach churn. Capacity assessment. Caleb Jefferson. I opened the latest email sent just yesterday. It was an attachment of a medical file. I opened the PDF, and there it was. My name, my date of birth, and a diagnosis that was a complete fabrication. Alzheimer's disease stage 4. Severe cognitive decline. Patient is unable to manage daily tasks, finances, or personal hygiene. Patient poses a danger to himself and others. Recommendation: immediate institutionalization in a state-secure facility. Below the diagnosis was a short message from Dr. Roberts. The paperwork is ready, Terrence. It says exactly what you needed it to say. The fee is $50,000 as agreed, cash only in a briefcase. Bring it to the clinic tomorrow morning before the hearing. Once I sign this, he is legally a vegetable. You can liquidate the estate immediately. I stared at the small screen, reading the words over and over again. Legally a vegetable. That was what I was to him. I wasn't a father who had worked double shifts at the docks to buy him his first bicycle. I wasn't the man who had taught him to tie his tie. I was a vegetable to be harvested for cash. He was going to pay a corrupt doctor $50,000 of borrowed money to erase my existence. He was going to throw me into a state asylum where I would be medicated into oblivion just so he could sell my house to save his own skin. I acted on instinct. I forwarded the email to my own encrypted secure cloud account, the one I used for my investment portfolio. Then I took screenshots of the text messages from Vinny. I sent those too. I needed copies. I needed insurance. My thumb hovered over the delete button for a second, but I decided against it. Let him panic. Let him wonder what I saw. Suddenly, the doorknob rattled violently. It wasn't a knock. It was an assault. "Dad, I know you are in there." Terrence's voice came through the wood, low and breathless. "Open the door right now." He had realized. He had reached for his phone to check a message or call his wife and realized he was holding my old battered device. He knew I had his life in my hands. I didn't answer. I kept forwarding emails, sending every damning piece of evidence I could find to my server. There were bank transfers to offshore accounts. There were texts to Victoria talking about how much they hated me. "Dad, open this door or I will kick it down," Terrence screamed. The veneer of the civilized lawyer was gone. This was the raw desperation of a criminal. The wood cracked near the lock. He was throwing his shoulder against it. I stepped back, sliding the phone into my inner jacket pocket and buttoning it shut. I wanted to make sure it was secure. I faced the door, planting my feet. The door splintered inward with a deafening crash. The lock gave way and the door swung open, banging against the tile wall. Terrence stood in the frame. He looked deranged. His hair was wild, his expensive suit was rumpled, and his eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and fury. He scanned the room and his gaze landed on me. "Give it to me!" he roared, lunging forward. He didn't look like my son. He looked like a stranger possessed by a demon. He closed the distance between us in 2 strides. He didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for an explanation. He grabbed the lapels of my denim jacket and slammed me back against the marble vanity. The impact knocked the wind out of me. "Give me the phone, old man," he spat, his face inches from mine. I looked into his eyes and I saw nothing. No love, no regret, just a black hole of need. "I saw everything, Terrence." I said, my voice calm despite the violence. "I saw the shark. I saw the doctor. I saw how much I am worth to you." His face contorted into a snarl. "You saw nothing. You are confused. You are senile, just like the doctor says." He released my jacket with one hand and reached for my pocket, trying to rip the buttons open. I grabbed his wrist. My grip was strong, strengthened by years of lifting crates, but he was younger, and he was fueled by adrenaline. "Stop this, Terrence," I warned him. "Do not do this." He didn't listen. He yanked his arm back and shoved me. Hard. It was a violent, brutal push meant to hurt. My boots slipped on the smooth, tiled floor. I stumbled backward, my arms flailing. My head cracked against the edge of the porcelain sink. A bolt of lightning pain shot through my skull, blinding me for a second. My legs gave out and I slid down to the cold floor. The room spun. I felt a warm wetness trickling down the back of my neck, soaking into my collar. Blood. I sat there dazed, blinking away the black spots in my vision. I looked up at my son. He was standing over me, breathing heavily. He wasn't looking at my head. He wasn't looking at the blood pooling on the white tile. He was looking at my jacket pocket. He reached down and snatched the phone from my pocket. He tapped the screen, frantically checking the sent folder, checking the photos. He didn't offer me a hand. He didn't ask if I was dying. He just cared about the data. "You made me do this," he panted, his thumbs flying across the screen, deleting everything. "Why couldn't you just sign the papers? Why do you have to be so difficult? You are ruining my life." I touched the back of my head and brought my hand in front of my face. My fingers were coated in thick red blood. I looked at the blood, and then I looked at him. He was deleting the evidence while his father bled on a bathroom floor. That was the reality. There was no going back from this. There was no misunderstanding. This was the end of 45 years of love. He shoved the phone into his own pocket and looked down at me, his eyes dead and cold. "Stay here. Do not move. If you tell anyone about this, I will tell the police you attacked Richard. I will tell them you are dangerous and confused. I will have you committed tonight." He turned his back on me. He walked to the door, stepping over the splintered wood without looking back. I watched him go. The pain in my head was a throbbing drumbeat, but the pain in my chest was gone. It had been replaced by something else. Clarity. Absolute freezing clarity. I grabbed the edge of the sink and pulled myself up. My legs were shaky, but I forced them to hold my weight. I turned to the mirror. The man staring back at me had blood on his neck and a bruise forming on his temple, but his eyes were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a judge. I reached into the hidden pocket of my trousers near my ankle holster and pulled out my smartwatch. I had taken it off my wrist before the dinner and set it to record audio, knowing a watch was less likely to be taken than a phone. I tapped the screen. It was still recording. It had captured everything. The threats, the admission of the fraud, the physical assault. I washed the blood off my neck with cold water using paper towels to stem the flow. I adjusted my denim jacket, buttoning it over the stain. I smoothed my hair. "You just made a fatal error, son," I whispered to the empty room. "You thought you were fighting a helpless old man. You didn't realize you were fighting the man who taught you how to walk." I walked out of the bathroom and I didn't look back. I wasn't Caleb the retired father anymore. I was Caleb the retribution. And I had work to do. I walked out of the restaurant into the driving rain, the blood on my collar stiffening in the cold night air. I did not go to the bus stop. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address printed on the heavy cream card Walter had slipped into my pocket before we parted ways in the lobby. The destination was in the hills, the oldest and most exclusive district of the city, where the streetlights were shaped like gas lanterns and the driveways were long enough to land a plane on. The cab driver looked at me in the rearview mirror, eyeing my bloodied face and denim jacket with suspicion, but the wad of cash I threw on the passenger seat kept him quiet. We wound up the serpentine roads, leaving the city grid behind until we stopped in front of a wrought iron gate that looked like the entrance to a fortress. I got out and the cab sped away, leaving me in the silence of wealth. I pressed the intercom button. There was no voice, just a heavy metallic clank as the gate swung inward. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots. The house loomed ahead, a Gothic monstrosity of stone and dark windows, looking more like a mausoleum than a home. The front door was solid oak, standing open. I stepped inside. The air smelled of old leather, unlit tobacco, and power. It was dark, save for a single pool of light in the library to my right. I walked in. Walter was sitting in a high-backed wing chair by a roaring fireplace. The transformation was complete. The ragged coat was gone, replaced by a silk smoking jacket that shimmered in the firelight. In one hand he held a crystal tumbler filled with amber liquid. In the other he held a cigar, the smoke curling up around his face like a crown. He didn't look like a homeless man anymore. He looked like a king in exile, a man who could order a city burned to the ground with a nod. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit, Caleb," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "You look like hell." I sat down, wincing as the movement pulled at the wound on my head. "My son pushed me," I said simply. Walter nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he already knew. He poured a second glass of bourbon and slid it across the small table. "Drink. It will help with the pain." I took the glass and downed it in one swallow. The burn was welcome. It cleared the fog in my brain. Walter reached down and picked up a thick manila folder from the floor. He tossed it onto the table between us. It landed with a heavy thud. "Read it," Walter commanded. I opened the file. It was a dossier on Terrence. It was detailed terrifyingly so. It had photos of him meeting with men who looked like they broke legs for a living. It had transcripts of encrypted emails. It had bank statements from accounts in the Cayman Islands. I scanned the pages, my stomach churning. It wasn't just the gambling debts. It wasn't just the loans from Vinny the Shark. It was worse. Much worse. Terrence had been selling client lists to Henderson and Wright's biggest competitors. He had been leaking litigation strategies. He had been shorting the stocks of companies his own firm was defending. "He is a traitor," Walter said, his voice ice cold. "He isn't just a bad son, Caleb. He is a cancer. In my world, we have a specific way of dealing with cancer. We cut it out." Walter leaned forward, the firelight dancing in his eyes, turning them into pools of molten gold. "I had a team ready to pick him up tonight," Walter continued. "We were going to take him to a warehouse down by the docks. He was going to have a tragic accident. A robbery gone wrong. It would have been clean. It would have been permanent." I stared at him. He was talking about murdering my son, and the terrifying thing was he said it as casually as if he were ordering dinner. "But then you paid my fare," Walter said softly. "You stood up for an old man on a bus when everyone else looked away. You showed character. You showed honor. And I am a man who pays his debts." He pointed a finger at me, so I called my team off. "For now. I am giving his life to you, Caleb. You hold the ticket. You tell me what you want. Do you want him gone? Do you want him in a box? Or do you want something else?" I looked down at the file. I looked at the photo of Terrence laughing with Victoria at a gala paid for with stolen money. I thought about the way he had looked at me in the bathroom, the way he had shoved me, the way he had deleted the evidence while I bled. "If he dies, he learns nothing," I said. My voice was raspy but steady. "If he dies, he is just a victim. He becomes a tragedy. Victoria plays the grieving widow. She spends the life insurance money. They win." Walter took a sip of his drink, watching me over the rim of the glass. "Go on." "I want him to live," I said. "But I want him to live a life that makes him wish he was dead. I want him to lose it all, Walter. I want him to lose the money. I want him to lose the job. I want him to lose the reputation he cares about so much. I want him to lose that house he tried to steal from me. And I want him to lose her. I want him to see her turn on him when the money runs out." I clenched my fist on the table. I want him to wake up one morning in a cold cell with nothing but the memory of the father he betrayed. I want him to strip naked of his arrogance. I want to break him, Walter, not his body, his soul. Walter smiled. It was a slow, predatory smile that showed all his teeth. "Now that is an answer I like. That is biblical." He set his glass down. "But to do that, we have to be smart. We cannot just sue him. He is a lawyer. He knows how to wiggle. He knows how to hide assets. We have to trap him. We have to let him think he has won." "How?" I asked. Walter tapped the table, his mind working fast. "You are injured. You have a head wound. You are 70 years old. So we use it," Walter said. "Terrence wants you incompetent. He wants you to be a vegetable so he can get power of attorney. If you walk out of here and file a police report, he will fight it. He will say you are confused. He will say you attacked his father-in-law. It becomes a he said, she said." Walter leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But what if the doctor is right? What if that fall in the bathroom caused a stroke? What if you lose your ability to speak? What if you become exactly what he needs you to be?" I frowned, trying to follow his logic. "You want me to pretend to be brain damaged?" "I want you to be a Trojan horse," Walter said, his eyes gleaming. "I want you to go into the hospital tonight. My private doctor will handle the admission. We will say you collapsed. You are unresponsive. You are helpless." And then I asked. "And then Terrence will think he is safe," Walter replied. "He will think the problem solved itself. He will bring his crooked doctor to sign the papers. He will start moving the money. He will start selling the assets. He will get sloppy, Caleb. Criminals always get sloppy when they think nobody is watching." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain. "We let him sign the papers. We let him commit the fraud on public record. We let him bring the notary. We let him dig a hole so deep he can never climb out of it. And when he stands in front of the judge, ready to take everything you have, we snap the trap." I understood. It was brutal. It was risky. It required me to lay in a hospital bed and let my son pick my pockets. It required me to endure the humiliation of his victory. But it was the only way to get total justice. It was the only way to ensure he went to prison for a long time. I stood up, ignoring the pain in my head. "Do it," I said. "Make the call." Walter turned back to me, raising his glass in a toast. "To justice," he said. "To retribution," I replied. Walter picked up an old rotary phone on his desk and dialed a number. "Dr. Evans," he said into the receiver. "Get the private suite ready at St. Jude's. We have a stroke patient coming in. And Evans, make it look convincing. We need a full paralysis protocol, but keep his mind clear. We are going hunting." He hung up and looked at me. "Lie down on the sofa, Caleb. The ambulance will be here in 10 minutes. When they arrive, you cannot speak. You cannot move. You have to trust me." I lay down on the leather sofa, closing my eyes. I let my body go limp. I thought about the bus ride. I thought about the 50 cents. I thought about the son who had pushed me. When the paramedics burst through the doors a few minutes later, I was ready. I was a husk. I was a victim. I was the bait, and my son was about to swallow the hook. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and flashing lights, but my mind was razor sharp. The paramedic attending to me was not a random city employee. He was Dr. Evans Walter's private physician dressed in an EMT uniform. As the vehicle swerved through traffic, he leaned over me, blocking the view from the driver. He pulled a syringe from a metal case. "Listen to me closely, Caleb," he whispered, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "This is a neuromuscular blocking agent. It is going to paralyze your voluntary muscles for about 6 hours. You will not be able to move your arms, your legs, or even open your eyes fully. You will look like you have had a massive brainstem stroke, but your hearing and your consciousness will remain 100% intact. You will be a prisoner in your own body. Do you understand?" I blinked once for yes. He nodded and found a vein in my arm. "This is going to feel cold. Do not fight it. Let the darkness take your body, but keep your mind awake. We will be monitoring you from the nurse's station. You are safe." He pushed the plunger. A wave of ice shot up my arm and spread across my chest. It felt like sinking into a frozen lake. My fingers went numb, then my toes. My chest felt heavy, as if an elephant were sitting on it. I tried to lift my hand, but it remained limp at my side. I tried to speak, but my tongue was a dead weight in my mouth. My eyelids fluttered and closed, leaving me in a gray twilight. I could hear the siren. I could feel the vibration of the road. But I was a statue. I was dead to the world while still screaming inside. They wheeled me into St. Jude's Hospital on a gurney. I heard the squeak of the wheels on the linoleum floor. I heard the chaotic noise of the emergency room. Phones ringing, people shouting, machines beeping. I was transferred to a bed in a private room. The sheets were stiff and smelled of bleach. I felt hands adjusting my position, hooking me up to monitors. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor became the soundtrack to my purgatory. Beep, beep, beep. It was the only sign that I was still alive. I lay there for what felt like an hour, trapping my panic in a cage of resolve. This was the plan. This was the trap. I had to endure this to catch the rats. Then I heard the door open, the click of high heels, the heavy tread of expensive leather shoes, and the smell, that cloying floral perfume that Victoria used to mask the scent of her own rot. "Oh God, look at him," Victoria said, her voice devoid of any real sympathy. "He looks like a wax figure. Is he dead?" "Not yet," Terrence replied, his voice shaking. "The paramedics said he collapsed. Massive stroke." "Good riddance," Victoria muttered. A third set of footsteps approached the bed, heavy, confident. This had to be Dr. Roberts, the man who sold his oath for $50,000. I felt a cold hand peel back my eyelid. A bright light shined into my eye, burning my retina. I couldn't flinch. I couldn't look away. Pupils are fixed and dilated. Dr. Roberts announced his tone professional and practiced. No gag reflex, no response to pain stimuli. He pinched my arm hard. I felt the pain sharp and stinging, but my body did not react. I screamed in my mind, but my face remained a mask of slack, lifeless flesh. "It is as I feared," Dr. Roberts continued, sighing theatrically. "It is a massive hemorrhagic stroke in the brainstem. It has severed the connection between his brain and his body. He is in a persistent vegetative state. He will never walk. He will never talk. He will never know who you are. Essentially, the lights are on, but nobody is home. And the lights are dimming fast." Terrence let out a sob. It sounded fake, forced out for the benefit of the doctor. "Oh, Dad, I am so sorry. I am—" "Stop sniveling, Terrence," Victoria snapped. "Doctor, what does this mean legally? Can he make decisions?" Dr. Roberts shuffled some papers. "Absolutely not. He is completely incapacitated. In the eyes of the law, he is no longer a person with agency. He is a biological entity requiring full-time care. You, as his next of kin, automatically have power of attorney in the absence of a living will. You have full control over his medical and financial decisions, effective immediately. I just need to sign the certification." I heard the scratch of a pen on paper. That sound was louder to me than a gunshot. It was the sound of my life being signed away, the sound of my freedom being stolen. Dr. Roberts had just declared me legally dead while I lay there listening to every word. "Excellent," Victoria said, her voice brightening. "So we can sell the house. You can do whatever is necessary to pay for his care," Dr. Roberts said, "and of course to manage his estate. I will leave you to say your goodbyes. I have the transfer papers for the long-term care facility ready at the front desk." The doctor left the room, the door clicking shut behind him. The silence that followed was heavy with greed. Finally, Terrence breathed. "We did it. It actually worked. I thought for sure he was going to go to the police after the restaurant, but he stroked out. It is a miracle. It is not a miracle, you idiot. It is luck, Victoria hissed. And we are not wasting it. Check the closet. Check his clothes. He must have keys or a wallet. I felt hands rummaging through the pockets of my denim jacket which hung on the back of a chair. I heard the jingle of my house keys. I got them, Terrence said. I will go to the house tonight. I will find the deed. I will find the bank books. We can list the property by tomorrow morning. While Terrence was busy with my coat, I felt a weight on the side of the bed. The mattress dipped. Victoria was sitting next to me. I could smell her perfume overpowering the scent of antiseptic. I felt her hand, cool and smooth, touch my left hand. For a split second, I thought she might be showing a moment of humanity. Maybe she was checking my pulse. Maybe she felt a flicker of guilt. Then I felt her fingernails dig into my skin. She wasn't holding my hand. She was trying to pry my fingers apart. She was going for the ring, my wedding ring. It was a simple gold band worn thin by 40 years of hard work. But inside the band was an inscription from my late wife. Forever my captain. It was the most precious thing I owned. It was the physical connection to the woman who had saved me, who had loved me when I had nothing. Victoria was twisting it, dragging it over my knuckle. It is stuck, she grunted. She pulled harder. The friction burned my skin. Terrence, what are you doing? Terrence asked, his voice coming from the other side of the room. Taking this, Victoria replied, panting with effort. It is gold, Terrence. And that little stone chip is a real diamond. Vintage. It is probably worth $1,000, maybe $2,000. That pays the interest on the shark loan for another week. Victoria. That is his wedding ring. Terrence said, his voice weak. Mom gave that to him. So what? She snapped. He is a vegetable, Terrence. He doesn't know he is wearing it. He doesn't know anything. And he certainly doesn't need jewelry where he is going. She yanked hard. I felt the ring slide over the bone. I felt it leave my finger. The loss was a physical blow, like an amputation. My finger felt naked, exposed. Inside, I was roaring. I was screaming with a rage that could have leveled the building. I wanted to sit up and wrap my hands around her throat. I wanted to crush the life out of her for touching that ring. But the drug held me down. The drug kept me frozen. Got it, she said triumphantly. She held it up. I couldn't see it, but I could imagine it glinting in the hospital light. Ugh, it is dirty. I will have to get it polished before I pawn it. She dropped my ring into her purse. The sound of it hitting her keys and compact was the sound of my heart breaking. You are cold, Victoria Terrence muttered. And you are rich, she countered. Or you will be as soon as we sell his dump of a house. Now stop whining and go sign the papers. I want to get out of here. This place is depressing. She stood up the mattress, springing back. She walked to the door, her heels clicking. I am going to call the realtor. Do not take long. She left the room. I was alone with my son who had watched his wife steal his mother's ring from his father's paralyzed hand and said nothing. My son who had just been handed the keys to my destruction. I felt Terrence move closer. I could hear his breathing ragged and shallow. He leaned over the bed. I could smell the stale wine on his breath from the dinner. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It was a light touch, hesitant. Dad, he whispered. I waited. I listened. I wanted him to say he was sorry. I wanted him to say he couldn't do it. I wanted him to call the nurse and say it was all a mistake. I gave him this one last chance in the silence of that room to find his soul. I am sorry, Dad, he said. My heart lifted for a microsecond. But I have no other choice, he continued. I can't go to jail. I can't lose Victoria. You had a good life. You lived long enough. This is survival. He patted my shoulder. 2 light taps. A dismissal. Goodbye, Dad. He walked away. I heard the pen scratching on the clipboard at the foot of the bed. He was signing the transfer order. He was authorizing the hospital to move me to the palliative care wing, the place where they put the hopeless cases to wait for death. He was signing me away into oblivion. The door closed. The room was silent again except for the beep, beep, beep of the monitor. But inside my mind there was no silence. There was a storm. He had made his choice. He had chosen the shark. He had chosen the thief. He had chosen the lie. I lay there in the dark, fueling my will with the memory of the ring being ripped from my finger. I focused on the feeling of the empty space on my hand. I would use that emptiness. I would fill it with a vengeance so complete, so devastating that he would wish he had died in that bathroom. The drug would wear off in 4 hours. Walter would come for me. And when I rose from this bed, I would not be Caleb the father. I would be Caleb the judgment, and judgment was coming for Terrence Jefferson. Family Courtroom 7 smelled of floor wax and stale despair. It was a place where families usually came to die, but today my son Terrence intended it to be the place where he buried me alive. He stood before the bench, his posture slumped in a performance of perfect sorrow. He was wearing his best charcoal suit, the one I had bought him for his first big trial. He clutched a handkerchief in one hand, dabbing at dry eyes, while the other hand rested on the stack of fraudulent medical documents. "Your Honor," Terrence said, his voice trembling with a practiced crack of emotion. "This is the hardest decision of my life. My father was a titan. He was strong. He was independent. To see him now reduced to a shell, to see him lying in that hospital bed, unable to speak, unable to feed himself. It breaks my heart." Judge Miller, an older man with kind eyes and a soft face, nodded sympathetically. He leaned over the bench, peering at Terrence over his reading glasses. "I understand, Mr. Jefferson," the judge said softly. "These cases are never easy. The medical report from Dr. Roberts is quite definitive. Massive brainstem stroke, permanent vegetative state. It is a tragedy. It is your honor." Terrence continued sniffing loudly. "And the medical bills are already piling up. He needs 24-hour care. He needs specialists. I am asking for full guardianship of his estate, not for myself, but for him. I need to liquidate his assets to pay for his comfort. I need to sell his house to ensure he has the dignity he deserves in his final days." Dignity. The word hung in the air like a bad joke. He was talking about dignity while planning to toss me into a state facility and spend my life savings on sports cars and vacations. He was painting a picture of a loving son burdened by tragedy, when in reality he was a vulture picking at a carcass before the heart had even stopped beating. Victoria sat in the front row of the gallery, her head bowed. To the casual observer, she looked like a grieving daughter-in-law supporting her husband. But I knew better. I knew she was hiding a smile. She was probably doing the mental math, calculating exactly how much the house would fetch in the current market. She was thinking about the ring she had stolen from my finger. She was thinking about the freedom my money would buy her. The judge sighed and picked up his pen. He opened the file in front of him. "Given the urgency of the medical situation and the clear evidence provided by Dr. Roberts, I see no reason to delay," the judge said. "The court is inclined to grant temporary emergency guardianship to Mr. Terrence Jefferson, effective immediately. This will allow you to access the accounts and list the property." Terrence let out a breath that sounded like a sob, but was actually a release of pure tension. "Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for helping me take care of him." Victoria looked up. Her eyes met Terrence's. There was a flash of triumph between them, a silent high five. They had done it. They had pulled off the perfect crime. They had silenced the old man. They had erased the past. They were rich. The judge lowered the pen to the paper. The tip hovered millimeters from the signature line. That signature would strip me of my rights. It would make me a non-person. It would hand the keys to my kingdom to the man who had shoved me into a sink and left me bleeding. Boom! The double doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open. They exploded inward, hitting the walls with a sound like a thunderclap. The noise startled the judge, causing his pen to skid across the paper, leaving a jagged line of ink. Terrence jumped, spinning around. Victoria gasped, clutching her chest. I walked in. I wasn't in a wheelchair. I wasn't on a gurney. I wasn't wearing a hospital gown. I was wearing a black bespoke suit that Walter had kept in his closet for special occasions. It fit me like armor. I walked with a cane, but I didn't lean on it. I used it to mark time. Click, click, click. My stride was strong. My head was high. My eyes were locked on my son. The color drained from Terrence's face so fast it looked like his soul had left his body. His mouth fell open. He staggered back, gripping the railing of the witness stand for support. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. He looked like he was seeing his own death. "Dad," he whispered. It was a sound of pure horror. I didn't say a word. I just kept walking. Behind me came Walter P. Henderson. He was dressed in a suit that cost more than the judge's car. He walked with the swagger of a man who owned the city, and behind him marched 10 lawyers. They moved in formation, a phalanx of briefcases and sharp minds. They were the sharks of Henderson and Wright, the killers of the courtroom, and they were there for me. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. The only sound was the rhythmic tapping of my cane on the floor. "Who is this?" the judge demanded, banging his gavel. Order. I said order. What is the meaning of this interruption? Walter stepped forward past the bar, bypassing the bailiff who looked too terrified to stop him. Your Honor. Walter boomed, his voice filling the room. I am Walter P. Henderson, senior partner of Henderson and Wright, and I am appearing on behalf of my client, Mr. Caleb Jefferson. The judge blinked. Walter Henderson. The Walter Henderson. The same Walter replied. And I am here to prevent this court from becoming an accomplice to a felony. Terrence found his voice. It was a high-pitched squeak. Your Honor, this is impossible. My father had a massive stroke yesterday. He is in a coma. This man. This must be an imposter. I stopped 10 feet from him. I looked at the sweat beading on his forehead. I looked at the fear in his eyes. Hello, son, I said. My voice was raspy from the paralytic, but it was loud and it was clear. I got better. Victoria let out a shriek. She stood up, knocking over her purse. The stolen ring probably tumbled around inside it. No, he was paralyzed. We saw him. The doctor said he was a vegetable. Sit down, Mrs. Jefferson, Walter barked without looking at her, or I will have the bailiff remove you. Walter turned to the judge. Your Honor, the petition before you is based on fraudulent medical evidence fabricated by a corrupt physician who was paid $50,000 in cash by the petitioner. Lies, Terrence screamed, his composure shattered. He pointed a shaking finger at me. He is confused. He is having a manic episode. Dr. Roberts is a respected specialist. Walter signaled to one of the junior lawyers. The young woman stepped forward and placed a laptop on the judge's bench. She connected it to the courtroom's audio-visual system. With the court's permission, Walter said, I would like to submit Exhibit A. This is video footage recovered from the security server of the restaurant Le Bernardin, taken 2 nights ago. Objection! Terrence shouted, desperate. That is irrelevant. Overruled. The judge said, his eyes narrowed. Play it. The screen flickered to life. It showed the interior of a high-end restroom. The angle was high from a discreet security camera. It showed me standing by the door. It showed Terrence bursting in. The audio was crisp. Everyone in the room heard the threats. Everyone heard the rage. You saw nothing, old man. You are confused. You are senile. Then the violence, the shove, the sickening crack of my head hitting the sink, the sight of my son standing over me looting my pockets while I bled. The courtroom gasped. The judge's hand flew to his mouth. Terrence stood frozen, staring at the screen, watching his own crime play out in high definition. That is not all, Walter continued. Exhibit B, audio recorded from Mr. Jefferson's hospital room yesterday afternoon. The audio played, the beeping of the monitor, the sound of Victoria's voice. He is a vegetable, Terrence. He doesn't know he is wearing it. Then the sound of struggle, the sound of my ring being ripped from my finger. And finally the confession. I have no other choice. I can't go to jail. I can't lose Victoria. The recording ended. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a grave. Terrence looked at the judge. He looked at me. He looked at the door. There was nowhere to run. Your Honor. Walter said, his voice dropped dead calm. Dr. Roberts signed a certification of incapacity for a man who was fully conscious and under the influence of a paralytic agent administered by my own private physician for his protection. Dr. Roberts is not a doctor. He is a criminal for hire. Terrence tried one last desperate lie. Dr. Roberts is the chief of neurology at St. Jude's. His word is law. You cannot discredit him. Walter smiled. It was the smile of the executioner. Actually, Terrence, I can. You see, this morning at 9 a.m., my holding company completed a hostile acquisition. I bought the controlling stake in the hospital group that manages St. Jude's. I own 51% of the hospital where Dr. Roberts works. Walter paused, letting the weight of that sink in. And as the majority owner, I have already fired Dr. Roberts for gross misconduct and handed his files over to the medical board and the district attorney. He is currently in custody, singing like a bird about who paid him to fake a diagnosis. Terrence's legs gave out. He collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Victoria tried to bolt. She grabbed her purse and ran for the aisle. Bailiff, stop that woman, the judge roared, standing up. No one leaves this courtroom. The bailiff blocked Victoria's path. She stood there trembling, trapped like a rat in a corner. Mr. Jefferson, the judge said, his voice shaking with anger. I am denying your petition with prejudice. I am also issuing an immediate bench warrant for your arrest for assault, elder abuse, and attempted fraud. I looked at my son. He was sobbing now, broken, defeated. I walked over to him. I leaned down close to his ear. You wanted the house, Terrence, I whispered. You wanted the money. You wanted the power. Well, now you have the attention of the court. I hope it was worth it. I turned my back on him. I walked back to Walter. It is done, I said. Not yet, Walter replied. This was just the defense, Caleb. Now we start the offense. Now we take everything. Terrence ran out of the courthouse and scrambled into a taxi, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The rain was still falling in sheets, turning the city into a gray blur of water and concrete. He barked his home address at the driver, his voice cracking with panic. He needed to get home. He needed to get to the safe in his study where he kept his emergency cash and his passport. He needed to grab Victoria and get out of the city before the police warrant was processed, before Vinny came for his fingers, before his life completely collapsed. He spent the entire ride looking over his shoulder, terrified that a police cruiser or a black SUV was following him, but the streets were empty, save for the rain. The taxi skidded to a halt in front of the wrought iron gates of the exclusive gated community where he lived, or where he pretended to live. The driver refused to drive in, so Terrence threw a crumpled bill at him and sprinted up the long driveway, the rain soaking through his expensive suit in seconds, ruining the silk and wool. He didn't care. He just needed to get inside. He reached the massive double doors of the mansion, the house he had bragged about, the house he had leveraged my life to keep. He fumbled in his pocket for his key card, his hands shaking so badly he dropped it twice into the mud. He snatched it up, wiping it on his sleeve, and jammed it into the electronic reader. He waited for the satisfying click of the lock disengaging and the green light that meant sanctuary. But there was no click. There was a harsh electronic buzz and a red light flashed on the panel. Access denied. Terrence stared at the light, blinking in the rain. He tried again, swiping the card slower this time, trying to force the machine to recognize him. Access denied. He pounded on the door with his fist, screaming for Victoria to let him in. Open the door. Victoria, open the damn door, it is me, he yelled, his voice lost in the wind. There was no answer. The house stood dark and silent, looming over him like a tomb. He tried the handle again, rattling it violently, but the mechanism was dead. The smart home system had locked him out. He was a stranger in his own driveway, shivering and wet, realizing that the technology he loved so much had turned against him, just like everything else. Then he heard the sound of heavy engines behind him, the grinding of gears and the beep, beep, beep of heavy machinery backing up. He spun around, wiping the rain from his eyes, and what he saw made his knees buckle. Two massive tow trucks were blocking the driveway, their yellow warning lights flashing against the gray sky. One of them was already hooking chains to the undercarriage of his silver Porsche 911, the car he loved more than he loved himself. The other truck was maneuvering toward Victoria's white Mercedes SUV, lifting it onto the flatbed like a dead animal being hauled away. "Hey, stop that! What are you doing? Those are my cars!" Terrence screamed, running down the driveway, waving his arms like a madman. "Get away from my cars! You have no right!" The tow truck driver, a burly man in a yellow slicker, didn't even look at him. He just kept working, cranking the winch, pulling the Porsche up the ramp, the metal screeching in protest. Terrence reached for the driver's door, trying to pull it open, but a hand grabbed his shoulder, spinning him around. He expected a police officer, but it wasn't the police standing there on the wet lawn surrounded by three men who looked like they were carved out of granite. It was Vinny the Shark. Vinny was wearing a long black trench coat and holding a black umbrella. He looked dry, comfortable, and terrifyingly calm. Usually when Vinny showed up, he brought a baseball bat and a lot of noise, but today he was quiet. He was smiling, a small, polite smile that was infinitely worse than his anger. Terrence stumbled back, slipping on the wet grass. He fell, landing hard in the mud, destroying his suit completely. "Please, Vinny, please." "I can explain," Terrence whimpered, holding his hands up to protect his face. "Just need a little more time. The deal with my father fell through, but I have other assets. I can get you the money. Just do not hurt me. Please do not hurt me." Vinny chuckled, a low rumble that vibrated in the air. "Hurt you? Why would I hurt you, Terrence? We are good. You and me, we are square." Terrence blinked, confused, rain dripping from his nose. "What we are square, but the money, the 200,000 paid in full," Vinny said, lighting a cigarette under the shelter of his umbrella. "Principal and interest every penny. The debt is cleared." Terrence stared at him, his mind unable to process the information. Who paid it? Did Victoria pay it? "No," Vinny said, blowing smoke into the rain. "Victoria did not pay anything. Victoria is busy right now." Vinny stepped aside, gesturing toward the front lawn. For the first time, Terrence noticed the pile. It was a mountain of soggy cardboard boxes, expensive clothes, designer handbags, and electronics thrown haphazardly onto the grass soaking in the rain. Sitting on top of a pile of wet silk shirts was Victoria. She was screaming at a moving crew that was hauling a white leather sofa out of the front door. "Careful, you idiots! That is Italian leather!" she shrieked, clutching a jewelry box to her chest. Her hair was plastered to her skull and her makeup was running down her face in black streaks, making her look like a melting gargoyle. Terrence looked back at Vinny, confusion warring with relief. If the debt is paid, then why are you here? Why are they taking my stuff? I am here because my new client asked me to oversee the transition. Vinny said, his smile widening, showing a gold tooth. My new client is very particular about his investments. He wanted to make sure the eviction went smoothly. He wanted to make sure no one got hurt. New client Terrence whispered, a cold dread settling in his stomach, heavier than the debt had ever been. A pair of headlights cut through the gloom. A long black car turned into the driveway, moving silently like a shark through deep water. It wasn't a police car. It wasn't a taxi. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. The grille gleaming silver in the rain. The car stopped 10 feet from where Terrence lay in the mud. The rear door opened. A driver in a uniform stepped out and opened a large black umbrella, holding it over the passenger door. I stepped out. I was not wearing my denim jacket anymore. I was wearing a charcoal gray suit cut from the finest wool, tailored to perfection by Walter's personal clothier. On my wrist was the Patek Philippe, finally visible for the world to see. I didn't have a cane. I didn't have a limp. I stood tall, breathing in the cold air, feeling the power of the moment coursing through my veins. Terrence looked up at me from the mud, his eyes bulging, his mouth hanging open. He looked from me to Vinny, then back to me, trying to connect the dots, trying to understand how the father he had left bleeding on a bathroom floor was now standing in his driveway, stepping out of a $500,000 car, with the man who had threatened to cut off his fingers standing guard. Dad Terrence whispered the words, strangling in his throat. I walked over to him, my shoes crunching on the gravel. Vinny stepped back, respectfully, tipping his head to me. I stopped 2 feet from my son, looking down at him with the dispassionate gaze of a judge looking at a condemned man. "Hello, Terrence," I said, my voice calm and clear, cutting through the sound of the rain and the tow trucks. "You," Terrence stammered, "you paid Vinny. I bought your debt." "Terrence," I corrected him. "I didn't pay it for you. I bought it. I own the note. Now, I own the interest. I own the penalties. And since you defaulted on the payment schedule, I exercised the clause in your contract allowing for immediate seizure of collateral." Terrence shook his head, disbelief etched on every feature. "Collateral? What collateral? I didn't put the house up." "No, you didn't," I said. "But when I bought the debt, I also bought the mortgage from the bank." "You were 4 months behind, Terrence. The bank was happy to sell the note to a private investor for cash." I leaned down, getting closer to his face so he could see the clarity in my eyes, so he could see that the dementia was a lie, that the weakness was a lie. "I am the bank now." "Terrence," I said softly, "I am the landlord. I am the repo man. I foreclosed on this property 10 minutes ago. You are trespassing on my land." Terrence scrambled backward, crab walking in the mud, trying to get away from me, trying to get away from the truth. "Dad, please, you can't do this. This is my home. It is a house," I said, straightening up. "A home is where family lives. You don't have a family anymore. You sold your family for $50,000 and a fake medical report." I signaled to Vinny. "You have 1 hour to remove your personal effects from the premises. Anything left after 60 minutes will be considered abandoned property and will be donated to charity." And Terrence, when I say personal effects, I mean clothes and toiletries, the furniture, the electronics, the art. Those stay. They are part of the asset seizure to cover the interest you owe me. Terrence looked around wildly, looking for an escape, looking for an ally. He saw Victoria standing by the pile of wet clothes, clutching the jewelry box. He scrambled to his feet and ran toward her, slipping and sliding. "Victoria," he shouted. "Victoria, talk to him. He is crazy. He is taking everything." Victoria turned to him, her eyes wide with panic. She saw me standing there with Vinny flanking me. She saw the Rolls-Royce. She saw the power shift instantly. She didn't look at Terrence with love or support. She looked at him with pure, unadulterated loathing. "You useless idiot!" she screamed, shoving him away, her hands tight around the velvet box. "This is your fault. You told me he was senile. You told me he was handled. You told me we were safe. I didn't know. Terrence pleaded, trying to grab her hand. I didn't know he had money. Get away from me! Victoria shrieked, backing toward the street, looking for a way out. I am not going down with you. I am not going to jail because you are too stupid to check your father's bank account. She turned and started to run, stumbling in her high heels, clutching the jewelry box to her chest like a football. Wait! Terrence yelled. Stop her, Dad! She has Mom's ring! She stole Mom's ring! I watched her run. I didn't chase her. I didn't yell. Vinny looked at me, raising an eyebrow, ready to send his boys after her. Let her go, I said calmly. But the ring? Vinny asked. I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen, showing Vinny the GPS tracking app. The little red dot was moving quickly down the street, headed toward the highway. I put a tracker in the lining of that jewelry box 20 years ago. After my house was burgled, I said, I know exactly where she is going. And so do the police. The officer arresting her will retrieve the ring as evidence of theft. Let her run. It just adds resisting arrest to her charges. Terrence stood alone in the rain, watching his wife abandon him, watching his cars disappear down the street, watching his father turn into a titan. He stood in the wreckage of his life, soaking wet broke and facing prison. I looked at my watch. You have 58 minutes left, Terrence, I said, turning back toward the car. I suggest you start packing. I hear the cells at the county jail are very cold this time of year. I got back into the Rolls-Royce, the leather seat warm and dry. I watched through the tinted glass as my son fell to his knees in the mud and wept. He was finally learning the lesson. I should have taught him years ago. Actions have consequences, and betrayal has a price. The walk to the Sullivan estate was a 5-mile march through hell. The storm that had started in my driveway had turned into a deluge, washing away the last remnants of Terrence's dignity, along with the mud on his ruined shoes. No taxi would stop for a man who looked like he had crawled out of a swamp, and his Uber app had been suspended along with his credit card, so he walked. He trudged along the shoulder of the highway, headlights blinding him, water soaking into his bones, shivering uncontrollably as the adrenaline faded, leaving only terror in its place. He wasn't running to the police. He wasn't running to a lawyer in his twisted mind. He was running to sanctuary. He convinced himself that Victoria had fled to her parents to protect their assets. He told himself that Richard Sullivan, despite the lobster bisque incident, would protect his investment. He told himself that they were still family, because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. He finally reached the stone pillars of the Sullivan estate. The house sat on a hill illuminated by floodlights, looking like a castle in a thunderstorm. Terrence didn't have the code for the gate anymore. Victoria must have changed it remotely, so he climbed. He hauled himself over the wet iron spikes, tearing his suit trousers, cutting his hands on the metal. He dropped onto the paved driveway, his knees cracking against the stone, and scrambled to his feet, running toward the massive oak front doors he didn't knock. He pounded with both fists, his blood mixing with the rain on the varnished wood. Open up, he screamed, his voice hoarse. Richard! Catherine, it is me. Help me, please. They took everything. The door didn't open immediately. He stood there for a minute, 2 minutes, shivering, shaking, hyperventilating, watching the shadows move behind the frosted glass panels. He knew they were in there. He could see the warm glow of the chandelier. Finally, the lock clicked. The heavy door swung inward, releasing a wave of warm, scented air that smelled of cedar and money. Terrence stumbled forward, ready to fall into his wife's arms, ready to be comforted, ready to be saved. But he didn't fall into Victoria's arms. He stopped dead in his tracks, staring at the scene in the foyer. Victoria was standing there, yes, but she wasn't crying. She wasn't disheveled. She wasn't the panicked woman who had fled my driveway an hour ago. She was wearing a dry cashmere sweater and holding a crystal tumbler of amber liquid. She looked calm, bored even, and she wasn't alone. Standing next to her, his arm casually draped around her waist, was Julian Vance, Terrence's former law school rival, a man who had left the firm 2 years ago to start a boutique hedge fund. Julian was wearing a smoking jacket and smiling that lazy, shark-like smile that Terrence had always hated. Behind them stood Richard and Catherine Sullivan. Richard was wearing a fresh suit, impeccable as always, his face a mask of stone. Catherine stood with her arms crossed, looking at Terrence, not with anger, but with the kind of revulsion one reserves for a roadkill animal that has been dragged onto a Persian rug. Victoria Terrence gasped, stepping into the foyer, water dripping from his clothes onto the marble floor. Thank God you are here. We have to go. My father, he is insane. He bought the debt. He took the house. We need money. We need a lawyer right now. Victoria didn't move toward him. She took a sip of her drink, her eyes cold over the rim of the glass. Stopped dripping on the floor. Terrence, she said, her voice flat. You are making a mess. Terrence blinked, confusion warring with his panic. Victoria, did you hear me? He knows everything. He has the texts. He has the emails. We need to leave the country. Richard, you have the jet. We can go tonight. Richard. Sullivan laughed. It was a dry, dusty sound. Get the jet ready for you, Richard asked, stepping forward. He stopped 5 feet away, looking at the puddle forming around Terrence's feet. You really do not get it. Do you, boy? You never did understand your place? My place, Terrence stammered. I am your son-in-law. I am family. You were an investment, Richard corrected him, his voice hard as flint, and a poor one at that. We tolerated you, Terrence, because you had potential. We thought you had the hunger. We thought you would climb the ladder at Henderson and Wright and give us access to the firm's blind trusts. But you are weak. You let your father outsmart. You, a man who rides the bus, outsmarted you. That is not fair, Terrence cried. He tricked us. He is not who we thought he was. No, Richard snapped. You are the one who is not who we thought he was. We thought you were a shark. Turns out, you are just a minnow. We do not help minnows, Terrence. We eat them now. Get out of my house before I call the police and tell them an intruder is threatening my daughter. Terrence looked at Victoria, his eyes pleading. Victoria, please tell them. Tell them we are a team. Tell them about the plan. Victoria sighed. She set her drink down on the hallway table and walked over to Julian, leaning her head against his shoulder. Julian kissed her forehead, stroking her hair in a way that spoke of long familiarity. There is no team, Terrence, Victoria said softly, her voice dripping with venom. There never was a team. There was just me, and there was you. The useful idiot. Useful idiot, Terrence whispered. Oh, honey, did you really think I loved you? She asked, a cruel smile playing on her lips. I loved the access. I loved that you were the signer on the accounts. I loved that you were so desperate to please me that you never looked closely at the bank statements. What do you mean? Terrence asked, his voice trembling. The gambling debts, Victoria said, examining her fingernails. You didn't lose $200,000. Terrence, you are terrible at poker, but you are not that terrible. I siphoned that money. I moved it out of our joint accounts and into a shell company in Zurich every time you thought you lost big online. That was me transferring funds. Every time you thought the market crashed, that was me skimming the top. Terrence shook his head, the world spinning around him. No, that is impossible. The loan sharks. Vinny. He threatened you. Vinny works for my father's security consultant. Victoria laughed. Vinny is an actor, you moron. We hired him to scare you. We needed you desperate. We needed you to feel like your life was in danger so you would go after your father's assets. Without asking questions, we needed Caleb's house to fund the final transfer to Switzerland. And you fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. Terrence fell to his knees again, just like he had in the boardroom, just like he had in the mud, crushed by the weight of the betrayal. You stole from me, he whispered. You stole everything. I didn't steal anything. Victoria spat, her face suddenly twisting into a snarl. I earned it. I put up with you for 3 years. I put up with your cheap suits and your boring stories and your pathetic need for approval. I earned every single cent. And Julian, Terrence asked, looking at the man holding his wife. Julian has been managing the Swiss account since day one, Victoria said, smiling at her lover. We have been planning this since our wedding day. We were just waiting for you to liquidate the old man's estate, but you failed. You couldn't even kill a sick old man properly. You are useless, Terrence. You have always been useless. Richard Sullivan stepped forward. He snapped his fingers and 2 large men in dark suits appeared from the shadows of the hallway. Security. Get this garbage out of here, Richard ordered, his voice bored. He is staining the marble. No, wait! Terrence screamed as the guards grabbed his arms. Wait, Victoria. You can't do this. I am your husband. I committed crimes for you. I embezzled for you. And that is why you are going to prison. And I am going to Europe, Victoria said, picking up her drink again. You signed the papers. Terrence, you authorized the transfers. Your name is on everything. I am just the poor wife who didn't know her husband was a criminal. Enjoy jail, darling. I hear orange is not your color. The guards dragged him backward, his heels skidding on the wet marble. "No, Victoria, please don't leave me. I have nothing. I have no one," Terrence screamed, his voice breaking. "You have what you deserve." Catherine Sullivan spoke for the first time, her voice icy. "You turned on your own blood, Terrence. A man who turns on his father will turn on anyone. You are a rabid dog and we are putting you down." They dragged him to the door. The heavy wood opened and the storm rushed in, howling like a banshee. The guards didn't walk him down the driveway. They threw him. They swung him like a sack of garbage and tossed him down the stone steps. He tumbled, landing hard on the gravel, his hands scraping raw against the stones. He lay there in the mud, the rain beating down on him, the cold seeping into his marrow. He looked up just in time to see Victoria standing in the doorway, bathed in the golden light of the foyer. She was leaning against, Julian laughing at something. He whispered. She didn't even look down at the man she had destroyed. She took a sip of her drink and turned her back. The heavy door slammed shut with a sound like a coffin lid closing. The lock clicked, engaging the deadbolt. The porch lights flickered off, plunging the driveway into darkness. Terrence lay in the puddle, the water soaking through his ruined clothes. He curled into a ball, sobbing into the mud. He had lost his house. He had lost his money. He had lost his freedom. But in that moment, lying alone in the dark, he realized the true extent of his loss. He thought about me. He thought about the father who had ridden the bus with him when he was a child, the father who had held his hand when his mother died, the father who had looked at him with pride when he graduated law school. He had traded that love. He had traded that loyalty for a woman who had never loved him, and a family that saw him as a tool. He screamed a sound of pure agony that was lost in the wind. He screamed for his mother. He screamed for me, but there was no one there to hear him. He was alone in the dark with the consequences of his own greed, and the only thing waiting for him now was the cold, hard reality of a prison cell and the crushing weight of a guilt that would never, ever leave him. The taxi dropped Terrence 3 blocks from the old house on 42nd Street because the driver refused to go any further into the neighborhood this late at night, especially with a passenger who looked like a drowned rat fleeing a crime scene. Terrence didn't argue, he just ran, his ruined Italian leather shoes slapping against the cracked pavement. He knew this street. He knew every pothole, every flickering streetlight, every shadowed alleyway. This was the street he had spent his entire childhood trying to escape, the street he had sworn he would never return to, unless it was in a hearse. But here he was running back to the only sanctuary left, in a world that had chewed him up and spit him out. The sirens were distant at first, a low wail rising and falling in the storm, but they were getting closer, cutting through the sound of the rain like predators closing in on a wounded animal. He knew they were coming for him. Walter Henderson didn't make idle threats. The embezzlement charges would be filed, the warrant issued, the manhunt initiated. He was a fugitive in a $3,000 suit that was now worth less than the rags on a scarecrow. He reached the small bungalow, the paint peeling the porch sagging under the weight of years of neglect. It looked exactly as he remembered it, small, humble and indestructible. He scrambled up the steps, his breath tearing at his throat like broken glass. He pounded on the door with both fists, the wood vibrating under his assault. "Dad, open up. Please, Dad. Let me in. They are coming." The house was dark, silent as a grave panic clawed at his chest. What if his father wasn't there? What if he was still at the hotel with Walter, or worse, what if he had truly abandoned him? Terrence pounded harder, his knuckles splitting open, blood mixing with the rain. "Dad, please, I know I was wrong. I know I messed up. Just open the door. I have nowhere else to go." He collapsed against the doorframe, sliding down until he was kneeling on the rough welcome mat. He sobbed uncontrollably, his body shaking with cold and terror. The sirens were louder now, turning onto the main avenue a few blocks away, blue and red, blue and lights flashing against the low clouds. He was going to die out here. He was going to be dragged away in handcuffs in front of the neighbors he had looked down on for years. Then he heard it, the heavy slide of the deadbolt, the slow creak of hinges. The door opened 3 inches, stopped abruptly by the heavy brass security chain. Terrence scrambled up, pressing his face to the crack, hoping to see salvation. I saw my father standing in the sliver of light. He wasn't wearing the suit anymore. He was wearing his old flannel robe and holding a cup of tea. He looked warm. He looked safe. He looked like the father who used to chase away the nightmares. But his eyes were different. They weren't the soft eyes of the man who forgave everything. They were the hard eyes of the man who had survived the docks. "Dad, let me in. Terrence begged, shoving his hand through the gap, trying to reach the chain. Quick, undo it. The police are coming. I know they are coming, Terrence, I said. My voice calm, steady. I called them. Terrence froze his hand, hanging limp in the air. You called them. You broke the law. Son, I said, taking a sip of tea. You stole from your firm. You stole from me. You conspired to commit fraud. I couldn't let that stand. But I am your son, Terrence screamed, his face twisted in agony. You are supposed to protect me. You have money. Now you have millions. You can hire the best lawyers, you can pay them off. You can send me away, hide me somewhere. Please, Dad, use the money, save me. I looked at him, this shivering, broken man who had once been my little boy, and I felt a pain in my heart so sharp it almost brought me to my knees, but I didn't show it. I couldn't show it. Saving him now would only destroy him later. I am protecting you, Terrence, I said softly. I am protecting you from the monster you were becoming. If I pay this off, if I hide you, you will never learn. You will just find another victim, another scheme, another way to cheat. It wasn't my fault, Terrence sobbed, slamming his forehead against the door frame. It was Victoria. She made me do it. She needed the money. She said she would leave me if I didn't give her the lifestyle she wanted. I did it for love. Dad, I did it for my marriage. Isn't that what you taught me to do? Anything for family. Do not, you dare use my words against me. I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. You didn't do it for family. You did it for greed. You did it because you were weak, because you wanted the cars and the suits and the approval of people who hate you. Victoria tricked me. Terrence pleaded. She used me. I didn't know she was stealing the money. I thought we were paying debts. I sighed. I reached down to the small table beside the door and picked up a thick manila envelope. I had been holding on to this for a long time, waiting for the right moment, waiting for him to see the truth. You think you are the victim? I asked, pushing the envelope through the crack in the door above the chain. Here, take this. Terrence grabbed it, his hands trembling. What is this? It is a report from a private investigator. I said I hired him 6 months after you married her. I didn't trust her, Terrence. I saw how she looked at you. I saw how she looked at me, so I had her watched. Terrence tore open the envelope, ripping the paper in his haste. Photos spilled out onto the wet porch, photos of Victoria meeting with bankers, photos of Victoria with other men, photos of bank statements showing transfers to accounts in Switzerland under her maiden name. She didn't just spend the money, Terrence, I said. My voice filled with a sad finality. She was laundering it. She was setting up a nest egg for when she left you. She has been planning to divorce you for 2 years. She was just waiting until you stole enough to make it worth her while. Terrence stared at the photos, the rain spotting the glossy paper. He looked at a picture of his wife laughing with Julian Vance at a cafe in Paris taken 3 weeks ago when she said she was visiting her sick aunt. He looked at the bank transfer receipts, signed with her distinctive, loopy handwriting. She played you, son, I said. She played you for a fool, and you let her because you were too busy trying to impress her parents to notice she was picking your pockets. Terrence dropped the photos. They scattered in the wind, blowing across the porch like dead leaves. He fell to his knees again, a guttural sound tearing from his throat, a scream of pure heartbreak and realization. He had destroyed his life for a mirage. I am sorry. He whispered, his head bowing until it touched the wet wood of the porch. I am so sorry, Dad. I lost everything. I have nothing left. I looked down at him, feeling the tears prick my own eyes. I wanted to open the door. I wanted to pull him inside and wrap him in a blanket and tell him it would be okay. That was what a father did, but I knew that was what had created this mess in the first place. I had shielded him too much. I had given him too much without making him earn it. You have something left, Terrence, I said, my voice thick. With emotion, you have the truth. Now you have rock bottom. And rock bottom is the only solid foundation you can build a real life on. The blue and red lights swept across the front of the house, illuminating the rain in strobe flashes. Tires screeched on the asphalt. Car doors slammed. Police radios crackled in the night air. Dad, please, Terrence whispered one last time, looking up at me through the crack. His face streaked with mud and tears. Do not let them take me. I am afraid. I reached through the gap and placed my hand on his head, stroking his wet hair just once. A final benediction. You should be afraid, son, I said. Prison is a hard place, but it is the place where you will find yourself. You will serve your time, you will pay your debt, and when you walk out of those gates, however many years from now, you will be a man again, not a puppet. I pulled my hand back. Goodbye. Terrence. Dad. No, wait. I closed the door, the heavy oak shutting out the sight of my weeping son. I slid the deadbolt home locking, him out locking myself in. I leaned my forehead against the wood, closing my eyes, listening. I heard the footsteps running up the walk. I heard the shouts, police hands in the air. I heard the scuffle, the sound of a body hitting the ground, the click of handcuffs ratcheting tight. I have rights, Terrence screamed, his voice fading as they dragged him away. I am a lawyer. I have rights. I walked into the living room and sat in my old armchair, the one with the worn velvet upholstery. I sat in the dark, listening to the sirens fade away, carrying my only child into the nightmare he had created for himself. I sat there for a long time, until the sun came up, and I realized that I wasn't just grieving for my son. I was grieving for the illusion that love alone is enough to save someone. Sometimes love means letting them fall so they can learn how to stand up. The heavy brass chain snapped taut against the doorframe, holding the barrier between my warm hallway and the storm outside. I stood there looking. Through the 3-inch gap at the wreckage of my son, Terrence was on his knees on the wet porch. His expensive suit ruined his face, a mask of mud and snot and tears. He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I didn't see arrogance. I saw raw, terrified desperation. He saw me not as his father, but as a lifeline made of gold. "Dad, please!" He choked out his hands, grasping at the doorframe like a drowning man clutching driftwood. "I know you have it. I saw the car. I saw Vinny back off. You are rich, Dad. You have millions. You could fix this with a single check. You could make it all go away. Just pay them off, Dad. Pay the firm. Pay the shark. Please. I am begging you." I looked down at him, feeling a cold, hollow ache where my heart used to be. "You want me to use the money I saved for 40 years to clean up your mess?" I asked, my voice quiet and steady. "The money I hid, so you would learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I didn't know." Terrence sobbed, his head dropping to his chest, his body shaking with the force of his weeping. "I didn't know. I thought you were just nothing." "I was so stupid, Victoria," she told me. "We deserved it. She told me we were owed, and I listened because I was weak. I took the money from the lead poisoning fund. Dad, I stole from sick children because I wanted to buy her a villa. I wanted to be the big man. And when it went wrong, I panicked." He looked up again, his eyes wild with terror, the blue lights of the approaching police cars reflecting in his pupils. "I didn't mean to hurt you in the bathroom," he cried, the words spilling out in a torrent of confession. "I was just scared." Vinny said he would cut her fingers off. "I thought if I could just get the house, I could pay him, and then I could put the money back in the trust before anyone noticed I was going to fix it, Dad. I swear I just needed time. But now the police are coming. Walter is coming. They are going to lock me up, Dad. They are going to destroy me." "You can stop them," he pleaded, reaching through the gap, his dirty fingers brushing the fabric of my robe. "You have the power now. You can hire the best lawyers. You can pay restitution. You can save your son. Please, Dad, do not let me rot in a cell. Do it for Mom. Do it for the boy you used to carry on your shoulders. I am still that boy, Dad. I am just lost. Help me. Please help me." He collapsed against the door, weeping uncontrollably, the rain washing over him, mixing with his tears. He was confessing to everything, not out of remorse, but out of a desperate need for the very resources he had tried to steal. He was laying his soul bare, showing me the rot at the core of it, hoping that my love was blind enough to cover it up one last time. I stared at my son, kneeling in the mud, begging for a financial lifeline that would only strangle him further, and I knew the time for words was over. I reached down to the small oak table beside the door, where I had placed a thick manila envelope hours ago, anticipating this exact moment. It was heavy, dense with the weight of betrayed trust and cold, hard facts. I pushed the envelope through the narrow opening above the security chain, and it landed with a wet slap on the porch right in front of Terrence's knees. "You think you are the victim here?" I asked, my voice cutting through his sobs like a razor. "You think you sacrificed your integrity for a woman who loved you? Open it. Terrence, look at what you really bought with your stolen money." Terrence looked at the envelope, his hands trembling so violently he could barely grip the paper. He tore it open, desperate for any kind of answer. Photographs spilled out onto the wet wood glossy images, capturing moments of intimacy and commerce that had nothing to do with him. There were pictures of Victoria meeting with men in suits in Zurich, pictures of her signing documents in the Cayman Islands, and bank statements, thick stacks of them highlighting transfers that matched the dates of his embezzlements almost to the dollar. "She wasn't just spending it, Terrence," I said, watching the color drain from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. "She was laundering it. She was moving every cent you stole into accounts under her maiden name. She wasn't building a life with you. She was building an escape hatch. She has been planning to divorce you for 2 years. She was just waiting for you to steal enough from the firm and from me to make her exit profitable." Terrence stared at a photo of his wife laughing with a banker in Geneva, a look of triumph on her face that he had probably never seen directed at him. He shook his head slowly, the denial dying in his throat as the evidence stared back at him, undeniable and cruel. "How do you have this?" he whispered, his voice hollow. "I didn't trust her from the moment she looked at my shoes at your wedding rehearsal," I replied. "I hired a forensic accountant and a private investigator. The day you married her, I have been watching her. Terrence, while you were busy trying to impress her parents and buying her affection, she was busy turning you into her fall guy. She played you, son. She played you for a fool, and you let her because you were too blind to see that she never looked at you. She only looked at what you could give her." I looked at the weeping man on my porch, and I felt a final, heavy stone settle in my chest. This was the hardest thing I had ever done, harder than burying my wife, harder than building an empire from nothing, but it was the only way to save the part of him that still mattered, his soul. "I am not going to save you from prison. Terrence," I said, my voice low and final. "If I pull you out of this fire, you will never learn that fire burns. I am not saving your skin, I am saving your conscience, and the only way to do that is to let you carry the weight of what you did." "But Dad," he screamed, reaching for me, his fingers grazing the door frame. "I will die in there. You will live," I said. "You will live to be a better man." I stepped back, breaking the visual connection, breaking the bond of dependency that had poisoned us both goodbye. "Son." I pushed the heavy oak door shut. The sound was a final thud that echoed in the empty hallway. I slid the deadbolt home, sealing my heart against his pleas. Outside, the world exploded into chaos. Blue and red lights washed over the frosted glass of the door, turning the entryway into a strobe light nightmare. I heard the screech of tires, the slam of car doors, and the authoritative shouts of officers moving in. I stood there in the silence of my home, listening as my son was read his rights, listening as the handcuffs clicked shut, listening as the only child I ever had was taken away to learn the lesson I should have taught him years ago, that the only currency that truly matters is honor. The federal courthouse was a fortress of stone and glass designed to intimidate anyone who walked through its doors. But 3 months after the night I threw my son out of my house, I walked in, feeling nothing but a cold resolve. The air inside was recycled and smelled of floor wax and stale coffee I sat in. The back row of courtroom 4B next to Walter, who looked like an emperor watching a gladiator match he had rigged. The gallery was packed with reporters, local gossip mongers, and former clients of Henderson and Wright, all hungry to see the fall of the golden couple. The prosecution had built a mountain of evidence, forensic accounting wiretaps and witness testimony. But the real show was about to begin, the dismantling of a marriage under the crushing weight of a federal indictment. Terrence and Victoria sat at separate defense tables separated by 10 feet of aisle and an ocean of pure, unadulterated hatred. They didn't look like the power couple who had sneered at me in the lobby anymore. Terrence looked gaunt, his suit hanging off his frame like a shroud, his skin sallow and gray. He kept his head down, staring at his hands, his eyes darting around the room looking for an exit that didn't exist. Victoria, on the other hand, had opted for the victim strategy. She wore a modest gray dress, little makeup, and a constant expression of bewildered innocence. She sat with her back rigid, refusing to look at Terrence, but every time he shifted in his seat, her lip curled in a snarl of disgust. Her lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Mr. Sterling, stood up to deliver his closing argument, and he didn't waste time attacking the prosecution. He went straight for my son. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, pacing in front of the box, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "My client, Victoria Jefferson, is guilty of only one thing: trusting the wrong man. She had no knowledge of the embezzlement. She had no knowledge of the illegal loans. She was a loving wife who believed her husband was a successful attorney providing for his family. Terrence Jefferson is a master manipulator, a man who lied to his firm, his father and his wife. He used her accounts without her permission. He forged her signature. He destroyed her life to feed his own gambling addiction and his desperate need to appear wealthy. Terrence jumped up, knocking his chair over with a loud clatter. "You liar!" he screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "She made me do it. She spent every dime. Look at the bags. Look at the jewelry. She threatened to leave me every single day. Sit down." Mr. Jefferson, the judge, barked, banging the gavel so hard it echoed like a gunshot. Terrence sank back down, his face purple with rage, but the damage was done. The jury was looking at him like he was a rabid dog, and Victoria was dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, playing the part of the betrayed spouse to absolute perfection. She looked at the jury and shook her head sadly as if she pitied the man she had destroyed. The prosecution called their final witness. The heavy oak doors at the back of the room opened and Walter P. Henderson walked in. The room went silent, instantly sucking in a collective breath. Walter didn't need to shout to command attention. He walked to the stand with the slow, deliberate gait of a predator. He took the oath and sat down, adjusting his silk tie, looking at the defense tables with a gaze that could peel paint. "Mr. Henderson," the prosecutor asked, "do you have evidence regarding the defendant's state of mind and the hierarchy of their conspiracy?" "On the night of the incident, I do," Walter said, his voice deep and filling the room. He pulled a small silver flash drive from his pocket and held it up like a holy relic. "During my internal investigation, I purchased the security system data from Le Bernardin restaurant. Specifically, the high-definition audio-visual feeds from the vanity area of the restrooms, which are legal in this jurisdiction, for security purposes. Ladies and gentlemen, the defense claims Mrs. Jefferson was a passive victim. Let's see if that holds up." The judge nodded. "Proceed." The lights dimmed and a large screen descended from the ceiling. The video flickered to life. It was crystal clear. High-definition footage showing the interior of the restroom, vanity area. Terrence was pacing back and forth, his face slick with sweat, holding my old phone to his ear. Panic written on every feature, but it was the audio that damned them. The sound was digital, crisp, and undeniable, amplified through the courtroom speakers. We heard Terrence's voice trembling with fear. "Victoria, I can't do it anymore. The shark is calling. My dad knows he suspects something. I want out. I can't steal from him anymore." Then came Victoria's voice, tinny but distinct, coming through the speakerphone, clear enough for every juror to hear the venom. "Listen to me, you pathetic little coward. You are in too deep. If you don't get that money, if you don't liquidate the old man's assets, I am leaving you and I am taking everything. I will tell the police. You did it all on your own. Do it, Terrence. Do it or you are dead to me." The courtroom gasped, a collective sound of shock. Victoria's mask of innocence shattered in an instant. Her face went pale as she watched herself command her husband to commit a crime. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Terrence looked at the screen. Tears streaming down his face, vindicated and destroyed at the same time. The video ended, leaving the jury with the image of a man broken by his wife's greed and a woman driving the getaway car from the comfort of her phone. "That video proves coercion," Walter said calmly, pointing at Victoria. "She was not a victim. She was the architect. She pulled the strings and he danced." The verdict came back in less than 4 hours. The jury didn't even need lunch. Guilty on all counts. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and elder abuse. The judge, a woman with steel gray hair and no patience for predators, looked at them over her spectacles and delivered the sentence that ended their lives as they knew them. "Terrence Jefferson, for your role as the executor of this scheme, for betraying your fiduciary duty to your firm, and for the callous abuse of your father, I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison. Victoria." "Jefferson," the judge continued, turning her gaze to the woman who was now shaking uncontrollably for being the architect of this conspiracy for money laundering and for coercion, "I sentence you to 10 years. The gavel banged a sound like a gunshot, ending the war. Terrence slumped forward, his head hitting the table, finally giving up the fight. Victoria screamed a raw, ugly sound as the marshals moved in to cuff her. She looked back at me, then her eyes filled with hate and fear. "You did this!" she shrieked as they dragged her away. "You ruined us, you old fool!" I stood up slowly, buttoning my jacket. "No, Victoria," I said softly to the empty air. "You ruined yourselves. I just turned on the lights as they hauled my son away." He looked back at me one last time. Our eyes met, and he didn't look angry anymore. He looked tired, He nodded, a small, barely perceptible movement of acceptance. He was going to hell, but at least now he knew why I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. Walter clapped a hand on my shoulder. "It is over, Caleb," he said. "Yes," I replied. "It is." Over. The visiting room at the Federal Correctional Facility smelled of industrial bleach and unwashed bodies, a scent that clung to the back of your throat long after you left. I sat on a hard metal stool, bolted to the floor, waiting for the heavy steel door on the other side of the plexiglass partition to open. It had been exactly 365 days since I watched the police drag my son out of my house in the rain. A year of silence, a year of legal motions and appeals. A year of watching the seasons change from the window of my quiet, empty home while my son learned to survive in a cage. I smoothed the fabric of my trousers, nervous in a way I hadn't been since the day I asked his mother to marry me. I wasn't here to gloat. I wasn't here to lecture. I was here to see what remained of the man I had raised. The buzzer sounded a harsh grinding noise that made me jump, and the door swung open. Terrence walked in, shuffling his feet in orange canvas slip-ons. His wrists were free, but he moved as if he were still shackled, shoulders hunched, head down, eyes fixed on the linoleum floor. He looked like a ghost of the man who used to strut through the lobby of Henderson and Wright. The arrogant lawyer in the $3,000 suit was gone, replaced by inmate number 74921. He sat down on the other side of the glass, and for a moment he didn't look up when he finally raised his eyes. I felt a physical blow to my chest. He had aged 10 years in 12 months. His face was gaunt, his cheekbones protruding sharply under papery gray skin. His hair, once styled to perfection, was thinning and cropped short, revealing the shape of his skull. But it was his eyes that haunted me. They were hollow, dark pits, devoid of the spark of ambition that had once defined him. They were the eyes of a man who had stared into the abyss and found nothing looking back. He picked up the black phone receiver, his hand trembling slightly. I picked up mine, the plastic cool against my ear. "Hello, Terrence," I said, my voice sounding tinny and distant in the receiver. He licked his dry lips, blinking as if the fluorescent lights were too bright. "Hi, Dad," he rasped, his voice unused and rough. We sat in silence for a long minute, just breathing, looking at each other through the scratched plastic barrier. The air between us was thick with things unsaid, with the ghosts of the past year, with the weight of the steel bars that separated our worlds. "You look thin," I said finally. It was a stupid thing to say, a father thing to say. "The food isn't great," he muttered, a ghost of a smile touching his lips, "but it doesn't reach his eyes. I miss your cooking. I miss the gumbo." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I can bring you some books next time," I said. "Walter says he can get them cleared by the warden." Terrence flinched at the name. Walter. He looked away, staring at the guard standing by the door. "I have had a lot of time to think, Dad," he said softly, his voice gaining a little strength. "A lot of time. To think about the house, about Victoria, about the firm, about you." He turned his gaze back to me, and for the first time I saw a flash of the old fire deep in his pupils. But it wasn't arrogance this time. It was confusion. It was a burning question that had been eating him alive for a year. Why, he asked, the word hanging in the air between us. Why, what son? "Why did you hide it?" Terrence whispered, leaning forward, his breath fogging the glass. "Why did you hide the money, Dad?" $12 million, Walter told everyone at the trial. $12 million in assets, stocks, property. He slammed his hand against the ledge below the window, the sound dull and heavy. "Do you have any idea what that kind of money could have done for me?" he hissed, his voice rising, trembling with a mix of anger and grief. If I had known you were sitting on a fortune, I never would have stolen from the firm. I never would have gone to the shark. I never would have touched the trust fund." Tears began to spill from his eyes, tracking through the grime on his face. "I did it because I was desperate, Dad. I did it because I thought I was drowning and I had to swim on my own. If I knew you were a safety net, if I knew you could catch me, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be a felon. I would be a partner. I would be successful. I would be the son you wanted." He looked at me with an expression of utter betrayal, as if I were the one who had committed the crime. "You set me up," he accused, his voice cracking. "You watched me struggle. You watched me drown in debt, and you did nothing. You let me turn into a criminal to teach me a lesson. is that it was this all just a sick test to see if I would break. I listened to him, pouring out his heart, his logic twisted by greed and regret. He truly believed that his circumstances had created his character. He believed that money was the cure for the rot in his soul. He didn't understand that money was just the fertilizer. I waited until he was finished, until his breathing hitched, and slowed until he slumped back against the metal chair, exhausted by his own outburst. I looked him dead in the eye, my own gaze steady and unyielding. "That is exactly why I hit it, Terrence," I said, my voice low and hard like iron. He blinked, confused. "What? You think money would have saved you?" I asked, shaking my head. "Son, money doesn't change who you are. It just magnifies it. It turns up the volume on your character. If you are a good man, money makes you a philanthropist. If you are a greedy man, money makes you a monster." I leaned closer to the glass, my intensity bridging the gap between us. "If I had given you that $12 million 10 years ago, you wouldn't be in prison today. You are right about that. You wouldn't be wearing orange. You would be wearing a $10,000 suit. You would be sitting in a corner office, and you would be the most dangerous man in the city." Terrence frowned, shaking his head. "No, Dad, I would have been happy." "No," I corrected him. "You would have been hungry because—" "You were already hungry, Terrence. You had a good job, you had a wife, you had a home, but it wasn't enough. You wanted more, you wanted faster, you wanted easier. If I had given you the money, you wouldn't have stopped stealing, you would have just stolen bigger, you would have bought judges, you would have bought politicians, you would have crushed anyone who got in your way because you would have believed that you could buy your way out of anything." I paused, letting the words sink in. "You would have become a tyrant, Terrence. You would have become a man who thinks rules are for poor people. You would have lost your soul completely, and you would have taken down hundreds of innocent people with you." I gestured around the visiting room at the concrete walls, at the guards. "This place, this cage, it is the only thing that could stop you. It is the only thing that could force you to look in the mirror and see what you really are, without the money, without the suits, without the lies." Terrence stared at me, his mouth slightly opened, the anger draining out of him, replaced by a dawning horror. He was playing out the alternate reality in his mind, seeing the monster he might have become, seeing the truth in my words. "So, you let me go to prison to save me," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I let you go to prison to stop you," I said. "And yes, maybe to save the part of you that is still my son. The part that knows right from wrong. The part that isn't buried under a mountain of entitlement." He looked down at his hands, calloused now from prison work assignments. He stayed silent for a long time, the hum of the ventilation system the only sound in the small booth. "So what now?" he asked, finally looking up, his eyes wet. "What happens when I get out in 11 years? Do I get the money? Then is that the reward for serving my time?" I sighed. Reaching into my jacket pocket, I pulled out a folded piece of paper and held it up to the glass. "No, Terrence," I said. "There is no reward." He squinted, reading the document through the plastic. It was a receipt, a deed of gift. I donated it. I said simply, "Yesterday afternoon I signed over 90% of my assets to the Victoria and Terrence Victims Fund and the rest to a legal aid society for the indigent, defending people who can't afford high-priced lawyers, people like the ones you use to evict." Terrence stared at the paper, his face blank, shock rendering him immobile. "You gave it away, all of it. Every cent. I said I kept enough to live on, enough to keep the house and pay for my bus pass. The rest is gone. It is doing good work now. It is fixing the things you broke." "But Dad," he stammered, "what about me? What do I have?" I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. "You have a clean slate, Terrence." I said. "You have zero. You have the same thing I had when I started working at the docks. At 18, you have your 2 hands and you have your brain." I stood up, the metal stool scraping against the floor. The guard at the door looked at his watch, signaling that our time was up. "When you walk out of those gates in 11 years, son, I will be there," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I will be waiting for you in the parking lot. I won't have a check for you, I won't have a new car, and I won't have a job lined up at a law firm." I leaned down close to the glass, placing my palm against it. "I will have a pair of work boots, Terrence size 10, just like mine, because when you get out, you are going to learn what it means to earn $1. You are going to learn what it means to build a life instead of stealing one." Terrence looked at my hand on the glass. He slowly raised his own hand, placing his palm against mine, separated by 2 inches of bulletproof plastic. His hand was smaller, paler, but it was steady. Work boots, he whispered, a tear sliding down his cheek. Work boots, I affirmed, and a hug, because you will always be my son, but you will never be my heir. You have to be your own man. The guard stepped forward. Time. Mr. Jefferson, I nodded. I pulled my hand back. Goodbye. Terrence, I will see you next month. Goodbye, Dad. Terrence said, his voice barely audible. I turned and walked away toward the heavy steel door. I didn't look back. I knew he was watching me. I knew he was crying. But for the first time in years, I felt a lightness in my step. I had lost a fortune, but I had maybe saved a man. And as the buzzer sounded and the door unlocked, I walked out into the sunlight, ready to take the bus home, ready to live the rest of my life, not as a secret millionaire, but as a father who had done the hard thing, the right thing. The number 42 bus rattled over a pothole, the suspension groaning in protest, just like it had a year ago. The smell of diesel and damp wool was exactly the same, a scent that permeated the fabric of the seats and the clothes of the passengers, but everything else had changed. I sat in the same spot near the back, the seat where I had met a ragged old man who turned out to be a king. But today I wasn't hiding. I wasn't wearing my old denim jacket to mask my net worth. I was wearing a navy blue suit cut from Italian wool, tailored to fit my frame perfectly. My shoes were polished. My shirt was crisp and white, and the Patek Philippe on my wrist was visible, catching the morning light. Next to me sat Walter P. Henderson. He wasn't wearing his homeless disguise today. He was dressed in a charcoal suit with a silk tie the color of old burgundy. He held a silver-headed cane between his knees, his hands resting on the pommel with the relaxed grip of a man who had nothing left to prove. The other passengers stole glances at us, wondering why two men who looked like they owned the city were riding public transit. But Walter insisted. He said it kept him grounded. He said it reminded him of where the fight really happened. Are you nervous, Caleb? Walter asked, his voice low under the hum of the engine. I smoothed the crease in my trousers a little, I admitted. I never thought I would be doing this. I thought I would be retired fishing on a lake, somewhere fading away quietly. Quiet is overrated, Walter chuckled, shifting in the plastic seat. You tried. Quiet, and look where it got you. Quiet almost got you killed. Loud is better. Loud gets things done. I looked out the window, watching the city blocks roll by. We were heading toward the University District, toward the grand auditorium where the first class of the Caleb Jefferson Legal Scholars was graduating today. It was a program fully funded by the assets I had liquidated. The money that Terrence had tried to steal was now paying for tuition, books, and housing for 50 young men and women from neighborhoods just like mine. Kids who had the brains, but not the backing kids who needed a chance. It is a good thing you are doing, Walter said, following my gaze. They are going to change the world, these kids. They are going to be the sharks that eat the bad guys. I hope so, I said softly. I just hope they do not lose themselves along the way. The bus slowed, pulling up to a stop near the campus entrance. The hydraulic doors hissed open and a wave of students poured in, laughing, talking, checking their phones. The energy in the bus shifted instantly, becoming younger, more vibrant, more chaotic. A young man stepped up from the curb. He was tall, with dark skin and short cropped hair. He was wearing a cheap suit that didn't quite fit him right, the sleeves a little too short, the shoulders a little too tight. He was carrying a stack of heavy law books in one arm and a backpack slung over the other shoulder. He looked tired. He looked stressed. But there was a fire in his eyes that I recognized instantly. He scanned the crowded bus, looking for a spot. His eyes landed on us. He saw two older men sitting near the back. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look away. He walked down the aisle, maneuvering around the other passengers with a polite excuse. Me, and pardon me? He stopped in front of us. He looked at Walter, then at me. Excuse me, gentlemen, he said, his voice respectful but firm. These seats are priority. Seating for seniors. Would you like me to ask those people to move? He pointed to a couple of teenagers sitting in the handicapped spots who were ignoring the signs. I smiled. No, thank you, son. We are fine right here. The bus lurched forward as it merged back into traffic. The young man stumbled slightly, clutching his books to keep them from falling. He regained his balance and grabbed the overhead rail hanging on as the bus swayed. He stood right next to my seat, looking down at me. I looked up at him, studying his face. He had the same high cheekbones as Terrence. He had the same determined set to his jaw. He looked so much like my son did 20 years ago that my heart skipped a beat. Heavy load, I said, nodding at the books. Yes, sir, he replied, shifting the weight towards. Contracts and constitutional law, final exams are next week. Law school, I asked. Yes, sir. First year, he said, a smile breaking through his fatigue. Hard work, but it is worth it. Why law? I asked the question, slipping out before I could stop it. Why do you want to be a lawyer? The young man hesitated for a second, looking out the window, then back at me. I grew up in a neighborhood where people got pushed around a lot, sir, he said, his voice serious, where people lost their homes because they couldn't read the fine print, where people went to jail because they couldn't afford a defense. I want to be the guy who pushes back. I want to be the guy who reads the fine print for them. I felt a lump form in my throat. It was the answer I had always wanted to hear from Terrence. It was the answer Terrence had given me when he applied to law school. But somewhere along the way, the words had become hollow for him. For this young man, they were still full of iron and blood. That is a noble goal, I said. It is the only goal, he replied. And honestly, I wouldn't be here without help. I got a scholarship this year. The Jefferson Scholarship. It pays for everything. Tuition, books, even a stipend for food. I do not know who this Caleb Jefferson guy is, but he saved my life. I was going to have to drop out and work at the warehouse, but now I can finish. I froze. Walter nudged my arm gently, a small smile playing on his lips. You do not know him? I asked, my voice thick. No, sir, never met him, the young man said, shifting his grip on the books. But I wrote him a letter. I told him that I am going to make that money count. I told him that every case I win, every person I help it, is because of him. I looked at his hands. They were rough, calloused hands, hands that had worked hard, hands that knew the value of $1. They were not soft, manicured hands that stole from family. What is your name, son? I asked Marcus. Sir, Marcus Williams, he said, extending a hand as best he could. With the books, I reached out and shook it. His grip was firm, dry, and honest. It is a pleasure to meet you, Marcus, I said, holding his hand for a second longer than necessary. I have a feeling you are going to be a great lawyer. Thank you, sir, he said, beaming. That means a lot. The bus slowed again, approaching the auditorium. Stop. This is us, Walter said, standing up and grabbing his cane. I stood up, adjusting my jacket. I looked at Marcus one last time. Good luck with your exams. Marcus, I said. Thank you, sir. Have a good day. Walter and I stepped off the bus onto the sidewalk. The sun had broken through the morning clouds, bathing the university in a warm golden light. Students in graduation gowns were walking toward the auditorium, their families trailing behind them with balloons and flowers. I stood there for a moment, watching the bus pull away. I saw Marcus through the window, finding a seat, opening his book, diving back into his studies. He didn't know he had just met his benefactor. He didn't know that the man in the blue suit was the reason he was there, and maybe it was better that way. He didn't owe me anything. He owed the world. His best effort, Caleb, Walter said, resting a hand on my shoulder. Are you ready? I took a deep breath. The air tasted fresh, clean. It tasted like the future. I thought about Terrence sitting in his cell, probably reading a book I had sent him, probably thinking about the choices he had made. I missed him. I would always miss the son I thought I had. But the pain was different now. It wasn't a sharp stabbing wound. It was a dull ache, an old scar that reminded me of where I had been. I looked at the crowd of students, the sea of bright faces and hopeful eyes. I had lost one son, but in a way I had gained hundreds. I had turned my tragedy into their opportunity. I had taken the poison of greed and turned it into the medicine of justice. I am ready, Walter, I said, smiling. We walked toward the auditorium side by side, two old men who had ridden the bus to hell and back and lived to tell the tale. The wheels of the bus hummed on the asphalt behind us, moving forward, always forward, carrying the next generation toward their destiny, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where they would go. Here is the conclusion and the lesson learned from the story written in Caleb's voice, followed by the CTA. As I watched the bus disappear into the traffic of the city, I realized that the greatest lie we tell ourselves as parents is that our job is to prevent our children from feeling pain. For years, I thought I was protecting Terrence by hiding my wealth, by shielding him from the struggle. But I was wrong. The struggle is not the enemy. The struggle is the forge where character is hammered into steel. Without it, you are just soft iron easily bent and broken by the first sign of pressure. My son believed that money was a cure, a magic eraser that could wipe away his mistakes and his flaws. But I learned the hard way that money is nothing more than fertilizer. If you pour it on a healthy garden, you get a harvest that can feed a community. But if you pour it on weeds, on greed, entitlement, and arrogance, you don't get flowers. You just get monsters that grow faster and stronger until they choke out everything beautiful around them. If I had bailed Terrence out, I wouldn't have been saving him. I would have been feeding the monster that was consuming his soul. True legacy isn't about bloodlines or last names. It isn't about handing down a fortune to someone just because they share your DNA. Legacy is about passing the torch of values to those whose hands are steady enough to hold it. It turns out you can't buy honor, and you can't inherit integrity. Those are things you have to earn in the mud and the rain, and sometimes in a prison cell. I lost a son to greed, but in doing so I gained the peace of knowing that I finally loved him enough to let him fall. Because sometimes rock bottom is the only foundation solid enough to build a real man. What would you have done in my place? Would you have used the millions to save your only son from prison, or would you have let him face the consequences to save his soul? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice and truth.